A warm and friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Blake Lovell. He does such an amazing job over at Southeastern 16. Finally out of the ice out there in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're going to chat with him all about what we've seen here in the Southeast Conference. How much has the storm affected some of these teams, / maybe not affected some of these teams? We're going to be taking a look at the landscape of that fine conference, and we're going to dive in with him on a few teams that he's got his eye on the next few weeks. We're going to be mentioning a few ACC teams as well, and then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, we had a fun day of college basketball on Wednesday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Not a ranked team, but being from the great state of Wisconsin, I have to mention this. Minnesota was up 35-17 at the half on the Badgers and managed to lose 67-63 the final as Wisconsin. They went 13 of 31 from 3. They pretty much hit all of them in the second half, and they actually go 6 of 17 on their 2-point shots. You don't find that very often, and lost the turnover battle 13-11, but John Blackwell, Nick Boyd, they combined for 44 points, so Wisconsin, after getting down 18 points in the first half, they do find a way to persevere. And Minnesota able to cash you a pretty solid under there, as overall for the season, they've been one of those teams that has been going under quite a bit for Wisconsin. Been a little bit wobbly for them thus far this season. If you take a look at them against the spread, and if you're a Wisconsin sports fan, man, it has not been a great 2026 for you. Trust me, I am a Green Bay Packers fan. They now fall below 500 against the spread. Wisconsin now 10-11 against the spread. But hey, Minnesota, at the very least, they've been able to cash you some unders thus far this season. As for Minnesota, 8 overs to 13 unders for them, and 8 overs to 13 unders for both Florida State and Stanford, pair of ACC teams that were in action. Stanford was able to get an over. Meanwhile, you got another under from Florida State. As Florida State, they win, but they do not cover against Cal, 63-61 the final, despite Florida State just going 6 of 28 from 3-point range and 11-21 at the free throw line. If you laid like 2.5 to 3 with Florida State, that's the reason why you did not get the cover. But for Florida State, they did win that turnover battle 11-7, and Chancey Wiggins was able to spy 18 points out there. And then for Miami, they get the win, and in some cases they covered, some cases they did not. This closed right around about 9 or so in a lot of places, 79-70 the final. And for Samford, they go 11-24 from 3-point range. For Miami, 6 of 15 from 3, but Miami 9 of 31 at the free throw line and 5 of 10 for Samford. I think that there were some late 150s that might have appeared on the board, and if you took a bad number, that might have cost you on that over. So always a lot of fun there. But for Houston, they were able to just barely get by, and they were able to get a cover against TCU. This by a count of 79-70. Got a little bit harebrainy there late, and Houston, the defense has been a little bit hit or miss here in the last few games, but for Houston, 9 of 23 from 3-point range. Kingston Flemings, he led the way with 27 points. Milo Suzanne has been a little bit hit or miss from 3-point range, but went 2 of 6 in this game. And for Houston, they are able to cover this number because they go 22 of 24 at the free throw line. TCU just 16 out of 25 at the free throw line, despite Xavier Edmonds, a double-double, 18 points and 10 rebounds out of him. For Florida, they just absolutely dump truck South Carolina. How about 95-48 the final? And it's been a Florida team that has been a little bit hot and cold with regards to covering spreads this far this season. And Florida, they themselves have been a solid under team, 8 overs to 13 unders this far this season. And South Carolina, it's been a little bit wobbly for them, to say the least, and on this day, it was just all sorts of bad. As for South Carolina, they go 3 of 20 from 3-point range, 15 of 58 overall from the floor, and Florida, they win their rebound battle 45-24. They actually lose the turnover battle 11-10, but they go 9 of 21 from 3-point range as Thomas Hall had himself a nice day, 18 points. Most of them came in the first half, as I believe that he had 18 first half points and South Carolina had 20 first half points. So that was some clean domination out there. And then the lone other team in the top 25 that was in action, that would be St. John's. They get it done. They get the win and cover 92-70 over Butler. And for Butler, they go 7 of 16 from 3-point range, but 15 out of 30 at the free throw line. That's out of helping out their cause, and they lost the rebound battle 41-31. Meanwhile, for St. John's, 18 points out of Ian Jackson. Jusan Sanan off the bench, 13 points, and he went 3 of 3 from three-point, so a very good display out there. If you're looking at your demonstrative teams with regards to overs and unders, there has been no more demonstrative over team than Denver. Now 17 overs, 2 unders, and a push as they get their second under of the season. Them and UMKC played an almighty slog as Denver's able to pull it out, but that game was 32-32 at the half. In the end, Denver does get the win by a count of, I believe it was 69-61. My ESPN app is right now screwing up, showing 32-32 at the half, but that's it for UMKC. They went 5 of 25 from three-point in this game. Denver just 5 of 20, but Denver, they do find a way to persevere. They get the job done, and you finally got an under in a Denver game, so yay verily to that, and yay verily to Tulsa, who's been one of your better over teams in all of college basketball as well. They're up to 14 overs and 5 unders, and for Tulsa, the Golden Earth game just has not been slowed down as they do take it to North Texas in this ordeal. They get the win, they get the cover, this by a count of 82-66 as you had 20 big points, 6 rebounds out of Tylen Riley as he goes just 1 of 2 from 3. Tulsa as a whole, 8 of 21 from the outside, in North Texas, 66 points or fewer in a road/neutral court game in all but one of their games thus far this season, so a rare over for them. But that said, for North Texas, they do lose the rebound battle 39-33, so for Tulsa, that was a nice, clean, quality winner out there. And then if you're taking a look at another team that has been able to cash you quite a few overs thus far this season, that'd be Duquesne. 13 overs to 6 unders. It's been very lackadaisical with regards to their defense, and St. Bonaventure has also been a really good over team. The Bonnies, they go on the road 87-79. They're able to get the job done, and St. Bonaventure now 15 overs to 5 unders thus far this season, as well as the Atlantic 10 has a lot of anarchy. Fordham, they were able to get a win and cover 64-58, so that held up to form. But for Duquesne, in this game, they allow St. Bonaventure to go 8 of 16 from three-point range. For Duquesne, they lose the rebound battle 35-34 and go 12 of 22 at the free throw line. St. Bonaventure 12 of 26 at the charity stripe, and Daryl Simmons, he goes for 31 points. And then George Mason, they, in a lot of cases, did not get the cover, but they get a win 60-52 over Davidson in what turned out to be a slog of a game. This was a game where George Mason was down 34-28 at the half, as they've been a really bad first half team, but they win the second half 32-18, and for Davidson, 8-26 from three-point range, so that was a little bit less than tremendous for them. If you're taking a look at some of your top under teams in all of college basketball, Fordham, just mentioned them, they just became the top under team in all of college basketball at that game against LaSalle. 4 overs of 14 unders thus far this season. Cincinnati, they're on to 5 overs to 16 unders, and they played yet another under on Wednesday as they take it to Baylor 67-57 as James Nandri continues to be about as successful as New Coke was in 1985, as he had as many points as myself. He has scored as many points in the last 4 games for Baylor as you listening at home. 0 zip nada. So good work there, Baylor. But that said, for Baylor, they go 6 of 26 from three-point range. Baylor did win the rebound battle 42-38, but they go 5 of 9 at the free throw line, and the Cincinnati team has been pretty pathetic this year. They're able to get the job done because Baylor, well, they completely screwed over their team by bringing in a guy that should have never been drafted to start with. So that's a lot of good, clean family fun out there. And then this team has been actually really good against the spread thus far this season. That would be DePaul. 14-6-1 against the spread. They do not get it done against Georgetown, though. A Georgetown team that's been, well, not so great against the spread thus far this season. For Georgetown, they get the win and cover 70-61 the final. I really think that they were missing Vincent Iuchuku a little bit earlier in the season. He came in off the bench. He gave the team 11 points. And for Georgetown, they go 5 of 12 from 3, and DePaul has been a rough three-point shooting team. They go 11-28 from the outside, but for DePaul, they lose the rebound battle 30-27. They go 2 of 5 at the free throw line, while Georgetown went 17 of 18, and they lost the turnover battle. Georgetown did by a count of 11-10, as well as it was a battle of one of the best teams against the spread in all of college basketball. And Georgetown, they're now 6-14 against the spread with that cover. Meet the Roadrunners of UTSA have gone 5-14 against the spread thus far this season. A little bit of a better effort against UAB as they do fall in this game, but 83-73, they are able to get you a cover as for UAB, 6 of 18 from three-point range, and for the Roadrunners, are 7-25 from 3, but For the Roadrunners, they only had 9 turnovers in this game, so they kept things relatively clean, so they were able to get a nice cover there. And Tulane has been a relatively rough team this year. They lose to South Florida 97-83. As for this Tulane team, they were able to go 13 of 34 from 3, but problem was they got lambasted on the glass 48-30. And for South Florida, they go 25 out of 35 at the free throw line. Wes Enos, he was able to go off for 25 big points in this one. And for Tulane, this has not been a very profitable team for you thus far this season, as now they fall to against the spread this season 8-12. Meanwhile, for Tulsa, I was mentioning them a little bit before, they're up to 12-6-1 against the spread with their cover, and North Texas is actually 11-8 against the spread if you're taking a look at the American landscape. And then other teams that have some very demonstratively good and bad results against the spread thus far this season. You've had Iowa be able to cover quite a few numbers. They're 13-7 against the spread, but unable to cover on Wednesday, as it does feel as though this USC team that's all sorts of banged up, starting to find themselves. They do lose this game, USC does, 73-72, but Cam Woods, who was pretty much a mid-season acquisition for them, he is now fully acclimated with the team. He had 33 points, he carried them, he kept them very close in this game, as it was 28-27 at the half. 90 points in the second half pushes you over, and Iowa has been one of your better under teams, but Bennett Sturtz, Tavion Banks, 20 points apiece, and Iowa pulls this out because they go 19 out of 22 at the free throw line, 11 of 16 for USC, so they stave off the outright upset, but they are unable to get the cover in that one. If you're looking at some of your worst against the spread teams, Loyola Chicago, they just continue to be miserable at 5-17 against the spreads. That has been less than tremendous, to say the least. And Oregon, they are 6-14 against the spread. As I am recording this podcast, they are right now getting it taken to them by UCLA. Do have to have this up by midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern, but unless if something extreme happens, Oregon is about like a 3-4 point underdog. They're currently down 57-42 with 8 minutes remaining. They are most likely not going to be getting that cover, so good job, Oregon. They have been just really falling off, to say the least. And then it has also been a little bit of a rough year for Wyoming. They are currently 7-13 against the spread themselves, and they just get absolutely housed by Utah State. Utah State, they go out there for a 94-62 win. As for Utah State, they had MJ Collins only get 12 points in this game, but they didn't need him. Kobe King, he goes 6 of 9, very nice off the bench, 4 of 7 from 3, 20 points for Utah State, 13 of 34 from 3, Wyoming 8 of 32 from the outside. And for Utah State, they were able to do a nice job controlling the turnover battle, 13-5. They win that battle. And for this Wyoming team, 8 of 32 from 3, but also they go just 13 out of 28 on their 2-point shots as well. So Utah State, they go out there, they absolutely dominate this game, and we're currently doing this as we've got one more result pending from the Mountain West as well. Right now, San Diego State all over Colorado State, up 70-48. That's in the closing seconds. So San Diego State, they're going to be able to get themselves a nice quality cover out there. And getting back to Baylor, by the way, they're now down to 7-12 against the spread thus far this season. And Tennessee, in that makeup game against Georgia, they're 7-12-1 against the spread. They have not been able to cover a lot of numbers, but Tennessee, they go on the road, they play some rock-solid defense, and they get it done in overtime, 86-85. The final, Georgia close in a lot of places a very slim favorite, but Tennessee, they do find a way to persevere with Jacoby Gillespie being able to fly 21 points. Now, Tennessee just 15-25 at the free throw line, but they dominated the rebound battle, 52-27. We'll be talking a little bit more SEC on the flip side with our good friend Blake Lovell, but if you're taking a look at trend-wise where we're getting in college basketball right now, it has been an underpalooza over the last 7 days in college basketball. Unders hitting at nearly 56%, 172 unders to 134 overs, so actually 56.2% to be exact. And underdogs, they're hitting at 51.3%, 157 and 149 against the spread. And if you look at the entirety of the season, underdogs hitting at right around that clip, 51.3%, 18-17 and 17-23 against the spread. Meanwhile, the under 8 is up to 50.6%, 1,792 unders to 1,749 overs. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's where we're getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we do chat it up with our good friend Blake Lovell of Southeastern 16 right here on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Decent Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word, .com. For anyone that is new new to VSiN? Well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Custom with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we've got Blake Lovell aboard. He does great work out there in what is a very snowy Nashville, Tennessee, a place where I lived for a year, and they've been certainly dealing with those storms, but he, no matter what happens, is staying true and doing a great job, staying on the beat of the SEC, looking at everything in that great conference, and really taking a look at everything nationwide with regards to college basketball over at Southeastern 16. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell. And Blake, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks as always for having me, Greg.
Always good to have you aboard. And first things first, before we dive into the hoops, before we dive into the just whole dynamic of these teams in the SEC, how much have these teams been impacted by the storm that we've seen over the last few days? Because I know you were talking with me off air. You were dealing with some power issues out there in Nashville, Tennessee. There's a lot of people across the country that hopefully they're getting power restored as I'm doing this podcast. But I have to imagine that this has been very impactful for all the teams out there in the SEC.
Yeah, I was saying earlier to someone, I thought there would be more, potential rescheduling of games and that kind of stuff. But really, it only wound up being Tennessee and Georgia moving from Tuesday night to Wednesday night. And so, the impacts in terms of like the atmosphere for some of these games, I think has been a little bit noticeable. You've seen the stuff like on social media where, schools are trying to give out sort of nice little perks for people who do come to the games. Was it the Oklahoma-Arkansas game? I think it's $2 beer and hot dogs all the way around. Free pizza for the students, Greg. So all those kind of things. You're trying to get creative because you kind of know that, your attendance could be limited in some of these. But in all honesty, watching these games, it hasn't been as impactful as I thought it would. And it certainly just depends on the area. I think that is a big factor in all this. But yeah, it quite honestly, it's not as much of a, kind of scheduling switch as I thought it would be, other than like I said, they moved the game from Tuesday to Wednesday. You had the games last Saturday, which was kind of when everything started to come in, get shifted around where everyone's starting earlier in the day and all that. But yeah, it kind of just turned out that maybe it was not as big of a potential headache for the SEC to try to, change games and have to reschedule for further dates and all that kind of stuff.
Hey, if you're giving me cheap beer to go to a college basketball game, you know that I am in on that. So, well done by these SEC teams. And we are doing this ahead of Tennessee versus Georgia. But how do you take a look at the dynamics of this conference? Because we know that Vanderbilt was really running things throughout, and then they take that 3-game losing streak. Looks like they're starting to restore a little bit of order. But it just feels like in the SEC right now, it's really lacking that top team, and it's really begging for someone to be able to separate from the pack.
Yeah, I think, as we've said before, it's kind of something where you can pick apart pretty much all these teams. And honestly, what's interesting is I think the team maybe that you can pick apart the least is Texas A&M. And, they're 6-1 in the conference as we're talking right now. If you look at kind of the results, it's hard to ignore the idea that, hey, this team has lost 2 games since November the 14th, and both of them were in overtime. They lost to SMU in overtime and on a neutral court by 13, which again, how many times you see someone lose by 13 in overtime? But it's like one of those where if you played it out 100 times, that may not happen again. They lose in double overtime at Tennessee in a game that quite honestly they should have won. But there's no shame in losing in Knoxville in 2 overtimes. And every other game they've won. And so I think when you look at it from that standpoint, like A&M does feel like a team. If we want to just eventually get there and say, hey, this team's not going anywhere, I think we've got all the sort of evidence we need to support that right now. But yet you can still probably look at a team like this and say, all right, there are some things you can do to frustrate them. Arkansas, they've been really good, but they've also been a little up and down on the road, like, many teams can be. But when you're losing by 23 at Auburn, you lose by 14 or 16 at Georgia. Florida, where you think they've all of a sudden turned everything around, then what happens? They lose at home to Auburn. And you just keep going down the line. Alabama, even though they've got Charles Bediako, they're still not a team that is at full strength. And so you can really pick on something with pretty much every SEC team, like I said, maybe other than Texas A&M at this moment, and feel like, there's something that could hold them back. At the same time, you do have a lot of teams that have a lot of pretty nice setups in terms of their ability probably to make a run in the NCAA tournament to the Sweet 16 or beyond. So I don't think that margin for error is not as wide as it was last year, but you're still seeing a conference I think is going to have quite a few teams in that 4 to 8 seed type range. It's just how many of those teams can, again, be what the top teams were last year, and are you going to get 4 in the Elite Eight, all that? Probably not.
Yep, it's going to be interesting to see what we get out of these SEC teams moving forward, as we do have Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and doing this out of the Wednesday games, but certainly there's a lot of Saturday games where I feel like there's a lot of equal teams match up with one another, like 2 of the bottom teams in the SEC, LSU and South Carolina, are going to be matched up. It's going to be interesting to see what Ole Miss is able to do at home against Vanderbilt, and then I just have a lot of intrigue right now with regards to the John Calipari Bowl between Arkansas and Kentucky, because for Kentucky, it looked like they were finally getting things online. It looked like, all right, order has been restored. They've won 5 straight games, and then against Vanderbilt, they just get completely blitzed. They look completely awful on offense, and Arkansas, out of all the teams in the SEC right now, they're the ones that I'm probably feeling the most bullish on right now, going into a game where you know that there's going to be no love lost between these 2 programs with the John Calipari connection.
Yeah, I think it sets up really nicely for Arkansas. I mean, if you remember last year, we thought the opposite when it came to like how great the matchup set up for Kentucky. And what did Arkansas do? They went in there and won in Lexington and all that. So you wonder if that gets flipped a little bit this year with Kentucky coming off the big loss at Vanderbilt. As you mentioned, Arkansas, I mean, I agree with you. Like right now, if you're picking an SEC winner, to me, I would probably still put A&M in that category, but it may simply be between Arkansas and Florida, because I think the Hogs have what it takes. They've proven it right now. They just find a way to outscore teams sometimes. Is the defense still got to get better for a full 40 minutes? Yes. But a lot of SEC teams, that's the case. It is kind of a year where you see a lot of these elite type offenses. You see some defenses that can leave a little bit to be desired. But with Arkansas having Darius Acuff, having Malik Thomas playing the way he's playing, the front court has obviously taken a big, I think, step forward in the right direction. It is just one of those where they just keep finding ways to win. And, you look at it, and I don't think they have to be perfect defensively. I think they are so good offensively. They take care of the ball. They just do pretty much everything well on the offensive side of the floor. And, it's easy when you do have someone like Acuff leading the way. So, yeah, Arkansas has got a very high ceiling. I think they have a chance to kind of take it to Kentucky on Saturday, but we've seen the Cats go in and win in a hostile environment in Tennessee and all that. But I think this could be at a different level, and I do like the matchup for Arkansas.
Yeah, but with Arkansas, I do feel like they're the team that I'm most bullish on in the SEC right now. This is obviously going into those games that we're going to be seeing on Saturday, and one of those matchups as well is going to be Tennessee versus Auburn, and I feel like that is going to be such an interesting polar opposite matchup, because with Tennessee, as we know, this is a team that is built on defense. We saw them do a really good job against Alabama, and I'm not sure about you, but it always just feels like year in and year out since Statos has taken over at Alabama, the team he's had the toughest time with is Tennessee. Yeah. That said, you've got an Auburn team that they've been able to click on all cylinders on offense. Obviously, a less than savory second half against Florida a few days ago, but still, they've been able to do a solid job on that front. How do you take a look at these 2 teams? Because I think that these are 2 of the bigger wild cards out there in the SEC, with Tennessee so good on defense, but having so many turnover issues on offense, and Auburn clicking on all cylinders on offense, but have yet to figure it out on defense.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, is like Auburn has strung together 3 good games in a row, I would say, defensively, in terms of, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Florida. And obviously the Florida part of that is the most impressive of the equation, just because, you're not really seeing Ole Miss and South Carolina as necessarily elite level offensive teams this season. But when you look at Auburn in most scenarios against some of those other teams, right, like a Georgia, like a Missouri, even an A&M to some degree, like, yes, they've had a little bit harder of a time doing that. But like they also have the body of work that tells us they held Arkansas to 73 points. And that's not been easy to do for anybody this season. I think it's just the inconsistency there a little bit, but I think they are figuring some things out. Defensively, they're headed, in a much better direction than they were, let's say, a month ago. And so now that they've kind of done some things to tweak that side of it, once again, they're a top 15 offensive team. And I think you look at Tennessee, and that's the one area that I just simply don't trust them. I don't trust that they offensively are going to be able to put together the kind of game that is going to necessarily make you always confident that they're going to find a way to beat teams like Auburn. Can they outscore them? Can they do enough defensively? Because that's the thing, right? Like defensively, Tennessee's still a top 15 team. in that department. And they're going to play better at home in that area. Just kind of, the numbers sort of play it out that way. But, it still feels like a little bit of a gap between the team that's finished in the top 5 defensively the past 5 years when Zakai Ziegler was there. So I love the matchup because I think we just saw, like you mentioned, Auburn go in and beat Florida on the road. Now you go play at Tennessee. And what do those two teams have in common? Those are two teams with very established front courts that can rebound the ball very well. And so if Auburn can keep that trend going, which they've done a good job of in the SEC play so far, I think they've got a great chance to go in and win that game. But at the same time, it's like, who knows where Tennessee's at? Like you mentioned, we're recording this before the Georgia game. If the Vols were to drop that, be it 3-4 in the SEC or something, that's about as must-win as it gets if you're Tennessee, trying to stay at least somewhere in that SEC title race moving forward.
It is going to be a really fascinating game out there, and just really all these teams in the SEC have a lot of intrigue. And I know that you just talked about Texas A&M, the way that they're building themselves up. Out of all the teams right now, who would you say is perhaps that biggest wild card right now? A team that might be like 3-4, 4-4, 4-3, just somewhere hovering around 500 that you could see being able to bolt up the standings, and these next few games might be very important for them.
Yeah, I think it is Alabama. I've probably said it multiple times as we talked this year, Greg. Like I said at one point, right? Like I did think they had the highest ceiling of any team in the SEC. And I don't know that I completely back off that now just because they have added Charles Bediako. How long will that last? We don't know. But I know he's made a big difference in a couple of these games so far, especially in the Missouri game. You look at what he did there. And so now you look at their 3 games they have upcoming. And like this is going to define Alabama's season potentially when it comes to this SEC title race. At Florida on Sunday, and then you've got Texas A&M at home, and then you're at Auburn. Like those are the 3 games that I think are going to probably decide whether Alabama is staying right there in the title race, a month from now, or are they going to, kind of fade back a little bit, and this winds up being one of those, maybe 7 type seed teams that you just simply don't want to see once you get to March. So they're the biggest question mark right now because you kind of look at the way these games have played out. They're still Alabama. They still are a top, 3 offensive team in the country. They do such a good job of taking care of the ball. Defensively, they are one of those teams that they don't really put a lot of resistance on you. They don't really force any turnovers. But with Bediako in the mix, they can be a much, kind of tougher team to play based on how they can defend the rim and rebound and those kind of things. So I think that's the biggest storyline without question to watch. Because if he were to play these next 3 games, and those teams in particular, we just talked about Florida, Texas A&M, and Auburn, I think that significantly does put Alabama in a position where they can win 2 of those 3 maybe. And if they win all 3, then they may be the team we're talking about 2 weeks from now that may be sitting at the top of the SEC.
It is going to be interesting to see what we get there, and it does feel very strange to watch Charles Bediako play these games. It reminds me of the movie The Benchwarmers, where you had that one guy that had the $10 bill saying, "I'm 12." That feels like Charles Bediako right now for Alabama, so it's going to be a lot of fun to see what we get out of them, and I do agree with you. I do think that non-conference schedule helps Alabama really be able to ascend here in the back half of the season. And Blake, I know that you're over there at Southeastern 16, and obviously the SEC is your main beat, but as you take a look nationwide, are there a few teams that are catching your attention that you just want to see what they do the next few weeks, whether you're bullish on them, whether you're bearish on them? Are there just a few teams that capture your attention and you're just very intrigued by what they're going to be able to do moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we always somehow find our way to the ACC just because I think it's just such a fascinating year for that conference. And, you can look at the standings and it's no surprise to see Duke at the top, but then you're looking at, a team like Clemson who's sitting there at 7-1. You've got Virginia and NC State, 2 teams that I think we talked about a lot this year. Kind of seeing could they reach that certain level of being maybe like the surprise teams, if you want to call them that. Well, NC State's now won 3 in a row after losing that game against Georgia Tech. You look at Virginia, they find a way to pull that game out against Notre Dame, kind of a thriller there. I look at teams like that and still am kind of interested to see how that plays out. The other team I'm going to point out, and this is one that I know has been talked about a lot this year, but it is St. Louis. And the reason why I say this, Greg, is because, yes, they're sitting there at 20-1 as we're talking right now. Josh Scherz has been fantastic in that position. And I just think, once again, they're going to be a team that, and remember, they're 21 when they're only lost by a single point to Stanford. He is someone that I think is kind of a fascinating figure when it comes to potential SEC job openings next year. And so I am going to kind of closely follow this St. Louis team to see where they can get to in the NCAA tournament because, based on the A10 right now, I think you'd be surprised. I know George Mason's right there in the mix, VCU too, but this is obviously a team that has a very high ceiling in what they can do, I think, once they get into the postseason. So curious to see how they finish things the rest of the way, but I think Josh Scherz is a name to circle when it comes to potential SEC job openings next year in potential various places, perhaps.
Yep, Josh Scherz has really been able to rise up. I remember just a few years ago, that guy was over at Lincoln Memorial, Division II school, and we've been seeing some rises with a lot of these guys. Look no further than Ben McCollum, what he's been able to do over at Iowa, so I'm very intrigued there. St. Louis, such a balanced team, and we always get great balance and great information on this podcast from you, Blake. You do such an excellent job out there in what has been a very, very snowy, great state of Tennessee, looking at so many different things, so love the good people at home. Know it's all on tap for you, and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yep, always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, find us over at Southeastern 16, all of our SEC stuff there, and everything else college basketball. You can find me on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell.
Absolutely. Blake is doing such an incredible job looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball, and every single time he joins me, he learns such great insight. So a big thanks to Blake for joining me on Custom Cup Soups, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts, and coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 16, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at @GUnit_D1. We are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with the bigger conferences first. Looks like we don't have any rescheduled games finally, and then the smaller conference games. This would be the Big South, the NEC, the America East. If we were to have any SWAC or MEAC games, which I don't think that we do, or Southland games, those are going to be the games at the bottom, so that'll keep things nice, clean, and easy. Let's get things started. 7:55, 7:56, it is Furman, and they're going to be playing us to Samford, and Sam Amford is a underdog hero, 6.5 to 7.5 points, 148.5 to 149 is the total, set a total of 149, so 148.5 is my max buy point on the over, but it is a buy point on the over regardless. You got a Furman team that is really not looking to play slow, but they're not really looking to play fast. We're in 43rd in the country in terms of total possessions frame. Samford looking to push a little bit more tempo at about 194th, and it is a Samford team that, to their credit, they've been able to do a solid job in terms of not allowing second and third chances in games played away from home. They've been a top 35 team with regards to their defensive rebound percentage, and it's a team that does not hurt themselves. Right now for Samford, 4th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, while Furman, they are about 248th. Now, Samford not really going to put you under duress or anything like that, and Furman's big edge is down low. This is a Furman team that is currently 18th in the country in terms of their two-point shooting percentage, but they've actually shot it better away from home rather than at home, and Samford, they're about a country average team in terms of their two-point shooting percentage. I've not really been able to figure it out at the free throw line, though, so that's something that is of concern in a tight spot, as Samford has Jaden Booth right now supplying 20.5 points, and he's been able to shoot 41% from 3 and 90% at the free throw line. The team as a whole, though, shoots 67.3% at the free throw line, so that's a big issue. Dylan Faulkner and Keaton Norris have been your other two double-figure scorers, with Faulkner down low, 17 points, 7 boards, block and half per contest, and then Keaton Norris pairs up with his brother Caden Norris, who combined for about 18.3 points per game. Keaton gives you about 4.8 assists and nearly a steal per contest. Caden, he shoots about 36% from 3, but team as a whole only shoots about 33.7% from the outside. Meanwhile, for Furman, they have been dealing with a few injuries, as Cooper Bowser, one of their main guys that returned from the season ago, he's been out for the last 9 games, so that means that Alex Wilkins, a freshman, has had to just really be the main man for the team. 18 points, 5 assists per contest, does turn the ball for 3.5 times per contest, and it's a Furman team that they themselves are right around about 300th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They've been solid with regards to their exterior defense, a top 150 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and to the credit of Furman, they're really not allowing second and third chances, which is a big reason why I did set my total only at a 149. The reason why I'm in on the over is that I do think that we do get enough, shall we say, fouling for the over, but that said, with this Furman team, it is one that has been able to do a nice job in terms of just being able to limit the good opportunities, 94th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, with Samford not allowing those second and third chances as well. I think that helps out, but that said, I do think that Samford is going to be able to have a little bit of success down low with having Charles Johnson right now for Furman, give you about 9.5 boards, 10.5 points per game, and then you do have Cole Bowser, who's been able to give you about 7 points per game, but he's been dealing with a lot of injury throughout the season as well, coming off of a 13-13 performance, so that's going to be able to help them out a little bit, but that said, these are really your main two guys down low, and outside of that, it's been a little bit lackadaisical for this Furman team, but you do have a Furman bunch, and it's really hard to trust in this spot as well. 66% free throw shooting team, bottom 30 mark in all of college basketball, so did side with Samford in this spot, semi line at 5, and with this total, semi at a 148.5, I'm going to be in on the over. 757, 758, Chattanooga, they play us a Wofford, and Wofford is a underdog here of 1.5 points in a lot of spots. They're becoming a 1.5 point favorite in some spots as well. Totals between 149.5 to 150, and I do like the over. I did set my total at a 156, and I'm going to take Chattanooga here on the money line / as a small favorite. I did set Chattanooga as a 4-point favorite. You've got two teams that are not good defensively. Right now with this Wofford team, they are about 218th in terms of total possessions, whereas Chattanooga's 296, so you're not going to get an up-tempo game, but you're going to get a lot of efficiency because Chattanooga, 310th of the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, Wofford 300th, and there's going to be plenty of good looks from three. Wofford is 318th in opponent three-point shooting percentage away from home, and Chattanooga, they are 14th in the country in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts that come from three-point range. Wofford has shot it well from three-point range away from home at 37.8%, so I set a total here of a 156, even though you're going to get a low possession game. I am in on the over, but with this Wofford team, it's still really hard to be able to trust in them in this sort of a spot. You've got a first-year coach in Kevin Glidner who took over midstream. It's a Wofford bunch that has been really giving it up down low as well. They're outside the top 240 in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage, while Wofford is good and taking care of the ball. Top 60 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Chattanooga does the same. Neither team generates any sort of turnovers whatsoever, and for Wofford, you've got a big two here, Niles Malachowski, who's been able to supply 16.5 points, shoots about 40% per three. You've got Kamari Holmes supplying 19 points, 2.2 steals, 6 boards, so these guys have been able to do a nice job there. They're really the only two of your top 6 scorers, though, that shoot above 33.5% for three-point range. Jane Taylor, he's actually been able to shoot about 58% from three, but he's been dealing with injury. He only gives you about 5.5 points per contest, so that's going to be interesting, and he's only given the team, I believe, 11 points in their last 5 games, so has not been himself. Meanwhile, you've got a Chattanooga team that they just don't have necessarily the scoring options that you've had in the past, but you do have that main guy who's been able to supply 15 points per contest in Jordan Frinson. He's shooting 44% from three-point range, and Brendan Watkins all of a sudden is shooting 49% from three-point range. Chattanooga's not going to give themselves any sort of second and third chances outside the top 330 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. That said, this is a Chattanooga team that, even though they don't generate any sort of turnovers whatsoever, and this is a team that is pretty sad on defense, they are a team that does a little bit of a better job in terms of being able to guard the three-point line. They're allowing teams at home to shoot just 32.3% from three-point range, so that'll mitigate Wofford a little bit. Again, you're not going to get any turnovers out of these guys, and down low Chattanooga, they're about 213th of the country in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, so I did think that they could put it together here in a pressure spot. You've got a Wofford team that shoots about 71.5% of the free throw line. Chattanooga, 76.9%. That's the top 45 mark. I do think that Chattanooga, as a result, gets the job done here. Set Chattanooga as a 4-point favorite, so we'll take them as a favorite / money line underdog, and I do like the over, so I may total on 156, 759, 760. It's William and Mary, America's favorite tag team, because you don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, you get both, as they are both on the road against Elon, and you get William and Mary as a 1.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 167.5 to 168.5, and I said Elon here is a 3.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take Elon on the money line. It is a William & Mary team that has been able to do a very nice shutdown job with regards to both generating turnovers and in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, but they are getting blasted on the glass. They are allowing teams to grab 33.8% of their missed shots as an offense, rebounding games played away from home, and that's where I do think that this Elon team is going to be able to get it done. You take a look at what Elon has been able to do on the glass, and they are 44th in the country, grabbing 33.8% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and for for William & Mary. They're a team that they like to ice up threes, and they're shooting 32% from three-point range away from home. That's a little bit below country average. Again, this is a William & Mary team that's going to put you under duress in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, 29th, and you look at that in a road/score venue that actually climbs into the top 10 in all of college basketball, and then that three-point shooting percentage defense, that's been able to travel really well as well, and Elon has been a team that's been pretty solid from three-point range for William & Mary. They allow teams to shoot 29% from three-point range away from home. That is a top 25 mark in all of college basketball, and Elon, right now, they are outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are allowing teams at home to shoot 39.1% from three-point range, so I do think that you get a whopper of a total here. I did some a total at a 167.5, so 168 does become that buy point on the under, just because I do think that you're going to get plenty of possessions that are wasted in this game, and Elon, not necessarily the most up-tempo team in the world, 151st in terms of total possessions per game. William & Mary just absolutely gunning it at 17th, but for William & Mary, it is very much a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach with this team, as you've right now got a quartet of guys between 10.8 and 11.6 points per contest. You throw in there a guy in Chase Lowe, who's been your main facilitator, 9.4 points, 5.5 boards, 4.3 assists per game, and then pretty much four other guys give between 5.5 and 7.8 points per contest. It's just a lot of guys coming together as sort of a cohesive unit, so it's been interesting to watch them be able to operate in general, and you do have a guy with good versatility in Tunde Valdir Fasasi, who's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3, 11.5 points, 4 boards per contest, but this has been a team that's been getting blasted on the glass, and for William & Mary, to their credit, they are really efficient on the inside. Top 40 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, for Elon, they do have that go-to scorer, Chandler Cuthrell. He's been able to supply 21 points per contest. Now, he only shoots about 29% from 3, but the ancillary scorers like Bryson Cockley, along with Kuiper Klanzic, these two guys have combined for 24 points per contest. They combined to shoot 44% from 3. Randall Pettis, the second, he comes over from the Rise in Lake, 13 points, shoots 39% from three-point range. It is an Elon unit that certainly has been giving it up quite a bit on the defensive side of things. Not going to put you under duress outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but they've been pretty good in terms of taking care of the ball themselves to be able to have these good, clean possessions in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Elon clocking in right around 117th in all of college basketball, and I do think that they do find a way to be able to get the job done here in a pressure spot. Their country average team shooting 71% at the free throw line. William & Mary does shoot 74% at the free throw line, but that said, it is a William & Mary team that has been a little bit suspect with that interior defense. I do think that Elon is able to win from within. I said Elon is a 3.5 point favorite, so I like them on the money line, and I'm going to be in on a 168 or higher to the under. 761, 762. Hampton is going to be on the road against Drexel, and the Dragons of Drexel are a 3.5 to a 4 point favorite. 127.5 to 128.5 is the total, and I made a total of a 129.5. I'm in on the over. This is despite the fact that you've got two super slow teams. Right now, for Hampton, 323rd in the country in terms of total possessions range. Drexel, 348th, but Drexel has been able to do an okay job in terms of giving themselves some second and third chances, and it's not a Drexel team that's going to put you under a whole lot of duress in terms of generating turnovers. 189th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Hampton, relatively okay in terms of generating turnovers. They're more around about 114th in the country, and it has been a Drexel team that has been wasting a lot of possessions themselves. You look at them on offense, and they're about 275th in terms of turnovers per possession. Hampton, they're more in that neighborhood, about 229th, but with this spot, it's going to be interesting to see which team gets to the free throw line, honestly, a little bit less, because you've got Hampton, who shoots about 73.5% of the free throw line. That's 147th. Drexel has been awful at the free throw line. They shoot 64.4%, 359th in all of college basketball, but even with that, I did make them the 5.5 point favorite, mainly because I do think that they're going to be able to get those second and third chances that they rely upon. This is a group that is 112th in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and with regards to this Drexel group, you've been able to have one nice headline scorer right now in Shane Blakeney, be able to go out for 13 points. He shoots 36.5% from three-point range. Kevin Vanderhorst, he's been able to supply about 10 points per contest as well. And then the ancillary guys, Eli Beard along with Victor Panoff, they both shoot 40% from 3. They both give you about 9 points per contest. And with Drexel, they really allow teams to not get a lot of good looks in general, even though they're not going to generate a lot of turnovers. Top 100 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. And with the Hampton group, they just have not been a good 3-point shooting team. They're outside the top 340 with that regard, shooting 29.4% from 3. Michael Ely, Jacalo Gaines Wyatt, they combine for 24.9 points per contest, but they also combine to shoot less than 30% from 3. I will say for Ely, he should shoot 86% at the free throw line. And Xavier Long, top rebounder in this game, 9 points. He supplies a little bit over 10 rebounds per game as well, but he's not really going to give you a lot of pop with regards to scoring. And I do think that a Hampton group that has been outside the top 125 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, they're just not going to be able to find those good looks from three that they need to, and I do think that Drexel, with their interior and being able to just grab those rebounds, finds a way to be able to get it done. Set my line at 5.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Drexel, and I'm going to be in on this over. I did set my total at a 129.5. 763, 764. The Citadel plays us with VMI. VMI an underdog of 2 to 2.5 points. 142.5 is the total, and set my line at 1. I was pretty much wanting to take whoever the underdog was going to be, and that is VMI. So we are going to be taking a shot on the points. Really don't want the money line here, as these two teams are not great, to say the least. Like, you take a look at the defensive efficiency numbers of both of these teams. The Citadel 357th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. VMI 354th, and it's not like the offense is necessarily lighting the world on fire either. So the Citadel 302nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. VMI, they find themselves outside the top 300 with this regard, as well as VMI officially is right now checking in 314th. So two very, very comparably awful teams, and for the Citadel, they have been able to find a pair of double-figure scores to help be able to uplift the offense a little bit, as you're getting a combined 24.5 points per contest out of Braxton Williams and Christian Moore. And we'll say Christian Moore shoots 39% for three, Williams shoots 36% from the outside, but they don't necessarily have great home and road splits. And additionally, for this Citadel team, they're not going to put you under any duress whatsoever. Outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, they're getting absolutely blasted down low. They're outside the top 350 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Out for the Citadel themselves, they're inside the top 3 with both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages. It doesn't sound like much, but I mean, it's something for them. And VMI, they might have the best scorer in this game. That'd be TJ Johnson, 18.5 points, 7 boards, and he's been able to shoot about 35.5% from 3-point range. It's a VMI team that they are very much looking to go bombs away from 3. They're a top 20 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range. And guess what? The Citadel is not doing a great job in terms of guarding the 3-point arc. At home, they allow teams to shoot 39.1% from 3-point range. That is not good, to say the least. Meanwhile, for VMI, when they're away from home, they shoot 28.6% from 3-point range. That's also not good, but that said, for VMI, you do have a pair of guys in Mario Tatum Jr., Linus Holstrom, who both give you about 10 points per contest, and you've been able to get a little bit of rebound here out of AJ Clark, who's been able to give you 6.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, nearly a block per contest as well. It is a VMI team that has been a little bit better in terms of generating turnovers, and it's a VMI team that they're in the top 310 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They're just getting blasted on the glass. VMI is one of the worst rebounding teams in all of college basketball, so Sola Adbasi, who's been able to give you 5+ rebounds per game for the Citadel, should have some success there, but I think that in a game that involves two absolutely horrible defenses, that you're going to get a close game. It's going to involve some late game fouling, and I think that does just enough for the over. So my total 145, I like the over, and with VMI, made them a 1-point dog, so we'll take the points with them. 765, 766, Stony Brook is on the road against Campbell, and the Fighting Campbells of Campbell are a favorite of between 5.5 to 6 points, and total on this game, you're going to be getting it between a 151.5 to a 152.5, and I like the under. I set my total here at a 145.5. Stony Brook is not a team that's looking to push a lot of tempo right now in terms of total possessions per game, 265th. Campbell, they're a little bit faster. They're hovering more around about 118th, but for Campbell, they actually do have some very good home and road splits with regards to their offense, as Campbell overall for the season, 203rd in the country in terms of points per possession, but they are averaging about 18.7 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home, with their 3-point shooting percentage very much being different home to road. 37.1% at home, 28.3% away from home. I do think that this irons out a little bit, and Stony Brook, they're actually a top 100 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at 35.6%, 38.6% at home, 33.2% away from home, but it's a Stony Brook team that just flat out is not executing inside. For Stony Brook, they're 291st in the country in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. Campbell, they've been more around about 206, so country average there, and it is a Stony Brook team that has been able to do a relatively solid job with regards to their interior defense. Stony Brook, with regards to teams launching from 3-point range, they've been about 265th with this regard. They do allow away from them teams to shoot about 35% from 3, and it is a Campbell team that's been a little bit, shall we say, hit or miss with regards to their defense as well. They're right now allowing teams to shoot 35.6% from 3-point range at home as well, but with this Stony Brook team, it has been a little bit of a, shall we say, rudderless and just strange offense, as you've got two guys in the backcourt that have been very good, with Eric Pratt leading the way with 20 points. He shoots 32% from 3, 3.5 assists per contest, and then Hot Rob Brown has been able to give you about 10.5 points. He shoots 37.5% from 3. Outside that, you don't have a lot of reliability with this team. Richard Goods is the only guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. He's flying about 7.5 points, 6 boards, 2.5 assists, so he's been able to do an okay job there for Stony Brook. They're generating a few turnovers. They're about a country average team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and that has really been the pitfall for this Campbell team. It's a Campbell bunch that's turning the ball over more than 13.5 times per game in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They're checking in just outside the top 300. And for DJ Turner-Up-Smith, he's been solid, give you about 20.5 points, shoots 37% from three-point range, but he is the only other top 5 scorers right now that is shooting above 33% from three-point range. They've been dealing with an injury to one of their top rebounders in Chris Fields. He has been able to come back, but in the 2 games since he's come back, he has scored approximately 0 points, so that leaves it to Davide Esbuca, who gives you 14 points, 9 rebounds per game to lock it down low, and Campbell has been a top 100 team with regards to offensive rebound percentage, but you really don't have a lot of offense pop in this game. But the one thing that Campbell is doing is that even though they are giving up a pretty atrocious three-point shooting percentage, they're pushing teams off the three-point line. They've been a top 20 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from inside the three-point line, and with Stony Brook just not executing on the inside, I do think that this Campbell team finds a way to get the job done. Sub-out line at 7.5, so I'm willing to lay it at 7 with Campbell, and I'm going to be in on this under, so I told 145.5, 767, 768. It is Charleston, and they're going to be on the road facing off against Hofstra. The Pride of Hofstra are 3.5 to 4.5 point favorites. 149 to 149.5 is the total. Set a total of 145.5. I do like the under. You have a Hofstra team that has been efficient on offense, but not necessarily fast. 287th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they're also allowing teams to shoot just 30.2% from three-point range, and it's been a Charleston team that's been awful with their three-point shooting, hovering right around 300 with that regard. The main concern for this Hofstra team is being able to guard down low. Charleston has been 90th in the country in terms of their two-point shooting percentage, but they just thrive so much better when they're at home rather than away from home, as they shoot over 59% from two-point range at home. Away from home, that goes down to 49.3%, and in a road/neutral venue, that does fall well outside the top 225, and Hofstra has been a top 25 defense in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and they're going to have by far the best scorer out there in this game, as Mr. Cruz Davis has been one of the best mid-major scoring guards in all of college basketball. Right now, he's supplying 22 points, nearly 5 assists from three-point range. He's been shooting 43.5% from three, and this Hofstra team shoots as a collective 37.9% from the outside. That is a top 35 mark in all of college basketball, and for Hofstra, it has been a bunch that has actually shot a little bit better from three-point range when they've been away from home rather than at home. That goes up to 39%, but still have been very effective regardless. And for Charleston, this is a unit that their numbers on offense are a little bit warped because they were dealing with quite a few injuries to begin the season. Kobe Duggan, ever since he's come off of injury, has been able to give this team 10 plus points per contest. It's a group that overall is 148th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they had early on during the season Colin Nickman, one of their main guards, deal with an injury as well, so they've been able to get some nice finds there. They're still dealing with the injury to Mr. Dean, which has been a bit of an issue, but Jalen Counter has been able to lead the way with 15.5 points, 5.5 boards, 5 assists per contest, shoots 35% from three for a team that is outside the top 30 with their three-point shooting percentage, but has been a Charleston group that has been able to do a nice job in terms of keeping things on from them, not turning the ball over, while they themselves are not going to put you under duress. They are well outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and I do think that Hofstra is going to be able to get it done because it's also a Charleston team that's been giving up a lot of second and third chances. In terms of defensive rebound percentage, they're outside the top 125 with that regard. Meanwhile, it is a Hofstra team that they themselves are going to give up those second chances on glass. They've been about 249th with regards to their defensive rebound percentage, but with James Boogie Patterson giving you 9 points per contest, Preston Eadman has been a nice number 2 guy for this Hofstra team, 15.5 points, 4 assists for a Hofstra team that they do such a great job down low. And it is a Hofstra team that they're a top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball in a pressure spot. They shoot 74.8% of the free throw line. I think Hofstra gets it done here in a lower possession game. So by total 145.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 7 with Hofstra. 769, 770 on the card. Liberty is going to be on the road against Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee, a home underdog of 2.5 points. 136.5 is the total, and I made Old Liberty Bibberty the 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, seeing a one straight 137 out there, and I would be willing to take an under as I did set my total at a 136.5. And for Liberty, they are a team that's getting blasted on the glass. They're a bottom 5 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. In terms of their defensive rebound percentage, 289. So there are going to be second and third chances to be had for Middle Tennessee. It's about a country average team in terms of defensive rebound percentage at about 168th or so, but they're not a team that necessarily helps in. There are a bunch of second and third chances themselves, and for Middle Tennessee, the name of the game for them is going to be holding teams down from three-point range. They allow opponents to shoot 31.6% from three-point range. That's the top 80 mark in all of college basketball, and that's going to be critical because this Liberty team is one of the best flamethrowers in the country. They shoot 39.9% for three, goes down to 37.2% away from home, but still really good with that regard. Meanwhile, it's a Middle Tennessee team that they've been sketchy with regards to their three-point shooting away from home, but at home that goes up to 38.1%. That is a top 75 mark in all of college basketball, but for Liberty, even though they don't do necessarily the the greatest job on the glass. They're still a team that's been really good with regards to their interior offense. They've been a top 10 team with this regard while playing at a super duper slow pace. Middle Tennessee, they're not going to look to push tempo either. They're about 254th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but Liberty, they take it to another level at 343rd. But for this Liberty bunch, they have been a top 100 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, can be at from 3-point range. They are outside the top 275 with that regard, but it's also a Liberty team that they just value every possession. That allows them to be able to get their tempo even better. They're a top 15 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and Zach Cleveland is a do-it-all guy. That gives you about 11 points, 8 boards, 7 assists, block and a half per contest. That frees up everyone else to be able to pop it from 3. Of your top 5 scorers, Cleveland is the only one that shoots below 38.3% per 3 because he doesn't attempt any threes. As Brent Decker, 50% 3-point shooter with 18 points per contest. Kaden Metheny, 13 points, shoots 38.5% per 3. Colin Porter shoots 42% per 3. J.J. Harper, he is able to give you 10.5 points. He shoots right around about 41% per 3, and outside of Decker, he gives you 18 points per contest. Next top 4 scores, all between 10.7 to 13.2 points per contest, so you've got good balance there. And then for Middle Tennessee, it's been all about what you've been able to get out of Mr. Kamari Lance. 13 points, 4 boards. He shoots 36.5% from 3, and then Torrey Olson has been really one of 2 guys on the roster that gives you over 4 rebounds per game, as Chris Lufay doesn't give you a lot of scoring with about 7 points, but throws in their block and a half, 6 rebounds per game, and Olson is that main scorer down low, a little bit over a block, 12 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. But I mean, these are 2 teams that are relatively slow and controlled. It's a Middle Tennessee team that, to their credit, they're a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, not going to put you under too much stress with regards to generating turnovers, but I do think that in the end, even though you're going to have some made 3-point shots in this game, I do think that Liberty is going to do a nice job holding up. I do think that they're going to be able to get their way with that regard, and it is a Liberty team that has been okay in terms of generating turnovers, about country average there. So did somebody total 136.5 out of 137 plus. I'm going to be in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4 here with old Liberty. 771, 772. It's Colorado on the road against Iowa State. Iowa State, a very sizable favorite here as you're laying 17 to 17.5 points with them. Total on this game, it is between 151.5 to a 154.5, so we're seeing some variance there, and I did somebody total 153.5, mostly seeing 154 to 154.5, and at a 154 plus, I'm in on the under, and would rather have a 154 to the under rather than a 153 to the over. But that said, for this Colorado team, I did set them as a 17.5 point underdog, want to lay up to 17 and not a hair more with Iowa State, one of the most balanced teams in the country. Iowa State, they have really been able to kick it up with their 3-point shooting with Milan Mimosilovic shooting darn near 55% from 3-point range with 16 plus points per contest. Iowa State overall, they do find themselves 4th in the country in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, goes up to 41.9% at home, and it's a Colorado team that's been able to shoot it quite well from 3 as well, 65th in the country and 30-point shooting percentage at 36%, but it does lower to about 33.8% when they are away from home, and Colorado just doesn't hold up defensively the same way that Iowa State does. Right now, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this Colorado team is 238th in the country, and ascends to the top 200 away from home, but just barely. In Iowa State, they are 6th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Their forte is always generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, they do once again find themselves in the top 10 in all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, they are currently 3rd in the country, generating a turnover on 24.4% of their possessions when they're at home on defense. And for Colorado, to their credit, they've been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of taking care of the ball. As it seemed, they only turned the ball over about 10 times per contest, top 40 team with regards to that ball security. And Isaiah Johnson, who's been mostly coming then off the bench, they've given him a few starts. He's been their top guy with about 16 points, shoots 42% from 3. And then Barrington Harkris continues to shoot 53.5% from the outside. He's been able to supply 14 points per game, but outside of Ben Godak, who's been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds, 11 points per game, you don't have anyone else that really gives you over 5.5 rebounds per contest, and this has been a team that's been horribly gash from the outside. Colorado's outside the top 10 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage with Mimo Silovic, coupled with the overall versatility that you've got out of Joshua Jefferson, who's been giving the team 17.5 points, 8 boards, 5 assists. He shoots 40% from 3. That's going to be hurting them big time. And then Tamon Lipsby, not really a guy that's going to bomb it from 3, but just does it all for this defense. 2.5 steals, 13 points, 5.5 assists per contest. Blake Buchanan has been able to throw in there about 6 rebounds per game, as Iowa State much better on the glass than they have been in the past. Top 50 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage. They've also been able to do a nice job on the inside, ranking in the top 120 in both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and it should get a relatively mid-tempo game here. For Iowa State, they're about 180th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. It's a Colorado team that is playing at a little bit of faster pace at 115th, but I think Iowa State generates those turnovers, and I do think that they're going to be able to hold down a Colorado team that has been struggling a little bit more with their offense away from home. Well, it'll lay up to 17 with Iowa State, made them 17.5-point favorite. And with regards to my total, set mine at a 153.5. I'm looking for that 154 or higher to the under. 773, 774. James Madison is on the road against Troy. The men of Troy are 8.5 to 9.5-point favorites. So last game, 148.5 to 150.5. And with Troy, I did set them as a favorite of 8 points. So 8.5 does become my buy point on James Madison. James Madison has just experienced a big fall off with their defense. This is typically a team under Preston Spradlin that's slow, controlled, and they do a nice job on this side of things. 288th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And Troy, they're more of a country average team, hovering right around about 163rd. And James Madison, they're not looking to push tempo, but they're a little bit faster than any season ago. 244th in terms of total possessions per game. Troy's cutting it at 21st in the country, but they're playing at a rate of about 5.5 to 6 possessions per game slower at home rather than away from home. That's because they had that double overtime game against San Diego State, that triple overtime game against USC that completely just warped their numbers. So this is more of a up-tempo team, but a little bit of a slightly up-tempo team, probably like a top 120 team in terms of total possessions per game. And Troy's been a good three-point shooting team. They shoot about 37.4% from the outside at home. Meanwhile, you got a James Madison group that they've actually shot 36.5% from three away from home. That's pretty much the same as at home. They're a top 55 mark in all of college basketball in that regard. But I do think that the Campbell brothers are going to be rock solid for Troy in this ordeal, as you've got Kobe Campbell along with Cooper Campbell, who both combined for about 23.5 points per contest. With Cooper, he gives out 5 assists, 2 steals. He shoots 41% per three, and Kobe shoots 45% from the outside, while Thomas out 15.5 points, 10.5 rebounds per game. Now for Troy, in a pressure spot, they shoot about 73.2%. Their free throw line, that is about country average, and they've been a relatively average team. Not great, not terrible in terms of both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. And Troy has been a top 100 team in terms of generating turnovers, but you got James Madison team that, for one, they're not going to put you under any duress. They're a bottom 5 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but they're a country average team in terms of taking care of the ball. And for James Madison, you do have in the backcourt a pair of guys in Cliff Davis and Bradley Douglas combined for 5.8 points per contest, and Davis, he shoots 38% from three. Douglas has given out 4.5 assists per game. Justin McBride, he's been able to give you about 6 boards, 17.5 points per game. It is a James Madison bunch that has been uncharacteristically bad on glass, outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but I do think that this James Madison team is going to do a just good enough job of being able to execute on offense to be able to hold in there. I did set my total at a 150 with the way that James Madison is going to be allowing a lot of clean possessions, so you're at the 148.5, 149.5, like the over, and I'm willing to take anything above 8 with James Madison. 775, 776. North Carolina T is going to be on the road against Monmouth. Monmouth is a 8.5-point favorite. 143.5 is the total, and I made Monmouth the 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's a Monmouth group that, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, has become a top 100 team. And for North Carolina A&T, this has been a bunch that has been a little bit all over the place this year. They're about 236th in terms of their points allowed on a per possession basis. One thing that they've been able to do a good job of is both their offensive and defensive rebounding. They're overall 44th in the country in terms of rebound percentage. You've got a Monmouth team that is a pretty country average team there, and Monmouth just not executing down low. They've been outside the top 275 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. As a matter of fact, it's down to about 300th, but you also have an A&T team that they themselves have been rough in terms of taking care of the ball, 300th in the country with that regard. They're about 200th in the country in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, but it's an A&T team that has been dealing with injury all season long, so they're going to need Bryson Ogletree, who's been giving you about 5 points per contest, but has been one of their best 3-point shooters to be able to give you a little bit more, as Leron Walker has been out the last 14 games. He's their number 2 scorer with 16 points per contest. Now Lewis Walker, 38% 3-point shooter, 18.5 points, 5 boards. He's been able to do a nice job there, but that's for A&T. This bunch, they shoot from 3-point range only about 31.9%. That's outside the top 270 in all of college basketball, and they're hovering right around about 300th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They block it down inside, but they really don't guard the arc, and that's going to be problematic up against a Monmouth team that they don't necessarily do the world's greatest job of being able to execute inside, but they shoot about 35% per 3-point range. Interestingly, Monmouth is a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their shots that do come from 2-point range, but they initially don't allow good looks inside. Top 75 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting defenses. They're also a top 20 team in terms of block rate, as Doc Mortar along with Jason Rivera-Torres both give you a block and a half per contest. Rivera-Torres is your top scorer, 15.5 points, 8 boards, only shoots about 31% per 3, but Justin Ray shoots 42% per 3, 12 points per contest. You've been able to have Andrew Ball be able to give you a bit of everything with 9 points, a block, just under a steal per contest, and then Jack Collins is that main point guard with 5 boards, 5.5 assists, 7.5 points per contest, shoots in the mid-30s from 3. For this Monmouth group, they are an okay team in terms of generating turnovers, top 110 team terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and I do think that they get the job done against an A&T team that has been rather sloppy with the ball, and I do think that A&T going to be playing at a mid-tempo pace moving forward, 148th in terms of total possessions per game. So I did set Monmouth here as a 10-point favorite. I'm willing to lay it, and like the over, semi-total at a 146, 777, 778. Western Carolina is on the road against East Tennessee State. East Tennessee State, 10.5 to 11.5 point favorites, 147.5 is the total. I made my total 149. I do like the over, as you do have a Western Carolina team that has improved a little bit with regards to their turnovers. They're still 267th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but this is a Western Carolina team that in games played away from home, they have been a top 55 team in terms of total possessions per game. East Tennessee, they're looking to slow things down. In terms of total possessions per game, they check in 306th in the country, but for East Tennessee, I do think that they're going to be able to do a pretty solid job on the glass, 43rd in terms of defensive rebound percentage, not giving themselves a ton of second and third chances, but they should be able to absolutely land base a Western Carolina team that's outside the top 330 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Well, for East Tennessee State, at home, they've been able to shoot 37% from three-point range, and for Western Carolina, those turnover wolves are going to be coming back to bite them against an East Tennessee defense that is a top 55 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per-possession basis and points allowed on a per-possession basis. You got two main headline guys that have both been able to give you between 14 to 14.5 points per contest, actually a trio in Brian Taylor, Cam Morris, and Blake Barkley. They've been dealing with a few injuries with Barkley, but should be good to go here. He's shooting 40% from three, and then Morris, along with Brian Taylor, they've been able to combine for about 9 rebounds per game. You get a block and a half per contest out of Morris, and then you've got a really good facilitator that has been not scoring at all in Alan Strouthers. As a matter of fact, he's got as many points as assists this year, 3.5 points, 3.4 assists per contest, so I do like the way that he's able to get everyone else all involved. And on the other end, for Western Carolina, their forte is being able to grab second and third chances. Top 90 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, as your main guy down low has been Samuel Dada, who's been able to give you about 7 boards, 6.5 points per contest, but Abdul Fantakaba has also been able to give you 5.5 points, 6.5 rebounds at a block per contest as well. For a Western Carolina team that's outside the top 250 with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, Marcus Kell and Cord Sainsbury lead the way with combined 27 points per game, but both shoot between 31 to 32% from three-point range. It's a group that when they get to the free throw line, they only shoot about 69% at the charity stripe. Those turnovers are quite costly, and additionally, this is a team that can be had down low. They're outside the top 240 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and they're not afraid to put you on the free throw line. A top 75 team in terms of free throws allowed on a per possession basis. Do think that East Tennessee State going to do a solid job down low and then generate those turnovers, get the fast break opportunities needed for the over. So set my line at 15. I'm going to be willing to lay with ETSU, and I like the over. Set my total at a 149, 779, 780 on the card. UNC Greensboro on the road against Mercer. And Mercer, a double-figure favorite here of 12.5 points, 161.5 is the total. Mercer's covered all but 3 games this far this season, and I think that continues. I did set them as a 13-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Greensboro. This is just a team that's fallen on tough times with regards to their defense. Still a relatively okay three-point shooting team, as Greensboro, they're shooting about 34.9% per three. That's a top 125 mark in all of college basketball. They're overall about 176th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but what is typically a good defensive team under Mike Jones. You say who? I say Coach Mike Jones. Well, it's not that this year. 353rd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they've sped themselves up to being about 190th in terms of total possessions per game. And I recognize that Mercer is not necessarily monsters of the midway, but they're a team that plays a little bit more up-tempo, 121st in terms of total possessions per game, and they've gotten themselves into the top 265 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. With Mercer, their forte is really generating turnovers that they will allow some good looks from three-point range. They're about 134th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per-possession basis, and for UNC Greensboro, they've been able to have Justin Neely be able to give you double-double, 16.5 points, 11.5 rebounds per game. You've had Lillian Marvel actually shoot 53% from three-point range with about 9.5 points per game. And for Greensboro, they do a nice job taking care of the ball. Top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're also outside the top 335 in terms of generating turnovers. Mercer has had a kryptonite of giving up a lot of second and third chances. They're outside the top 300 with regards to defensive rebound percentage. Top 80 team in terms of their own offensive rebound percentage, but they've been a top 100 team in terms of both their own two-point shooting percentage and opponents' two-point shooting percentage. If you include non-D1 games of Baraka Okoji, 18.5 points, 5.5 assists per game. He's been the main headliner for this offense, but Armani Mighty is able to give you 2 blocks per contest. Zaire Williams, who comes over from Wagner, 12.5 points, mid-33 point shooter, and then you've got Mr. Do-It-All and Brady Shoulders, who's been shouldering the load with 9.8 points, 6.8 boards, 2 assists, 2 steals, so I really like what he brings to the table. It's a Mercer team that, if you need free throws to cover, they're a country average team, shooting about 73.5% at the charity stripe, and they've been able to generate the turnovers the way that they have. And for this UNC Greensboro team, with them not really grabbing a lot of second and third chances, they don't give up a ton of them, but Greensboro outside the top 140 in terms of overall rebound percentage. I think that Mercer gets the job done here, so I did set my line at 13.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it and set a total of a 161.5. It's seeing a few 162s out there. Actually open up at a 167 at a 162 or higher, like the under to go along with Mercer. 781, 782. It's Georgia Southern, eh? They're on the road against Louisiana Monroe. Monroe's an underdog of 9.5 points, so on scheme 160 to 160.5. Set Georgia Southern as an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. We got two teams that are really looking to bump up tempo with this Georgia Southern team, 20th in the country in terms of total possessions frame, more around about 67th for Monroe. Monroe's been an okay 3-point shooting team. They shoot 34%. That's 178th. That despite the fact that in their last 3 games they have shot a nice hearty 23.1% from 3-point range. I do think that that's going to be going northward a little bit as they've just been cold. They had that back-to-back spot last week due to the storm, so I do think that things are going to normalize a little bit. And you had 2 nice go-to scorers, Matavius Russell, Kristen Lewis. They combine for 31.9 points per game, and Russell shoots 36% from 3. They combine for about 3 steals per contest, but it is a Monroe team that's outside the top 330 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're not bad in terms of guarding the arc, top 275 team there, but they're outside the top 330 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And while Georgia Southern is a team that ranks in the top 50 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range, they only shoot about 32% from the outside, while they're a top 175 team in terms of both points per possession and their 2-point shooting percentage. And the main thing for Georgia Southern is that they do a really good job in terms of taking care of the ball, in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. This is a unit that does rank in the top 50 in all of college basketball, and you've got a good backcourt that involves a guy that was their top scorer 2 years ago. He's come back in Tyron Moore, spent a year over at UAB. He's come back. He's been able to give you about a pair of assists, 14 points, shoots 36% from 3, and then Spud Webb, 16 points, 3 assists, nearly 3 steals per contest. And for Georgia Southern, their forte on defense is being a top 85 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Can be added down low. They're outside the top 225 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but this is also a Georgia Southern team that they're going to give up some looks from the free throw line, and they themselves are going to be able to do a solid job in terms of being able to get to the free throw line. If you take a look at just free throws attempted on an offensive play basis, you've got Georgia Southern right now 38th in all of college basketball with Louisiana Monroe. Their team that's getting blasted on the glass are outside the top 330 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. I think that Georgia Southern is going to be able to run up and down with the way that they protect the ball and the way that Monroe just doesn't really guard either the 3-point line or the shots inside the arc. I do think that Georgia Southern gets the job done here. Set my line at 11.5. I'm a little up to 11 with Georgia Southern. I like the over. Set my total 167.5, 783, 784. You've got SIU Edwardsville, and they are going to be on the road against Morehead St. And Morehead St does find themselves as between a 1.5 point favorite to a 1.5 point underdog, depending upon your book. And so on this game, you're finding it at a 133.5. Most books have flipped to Morehead St being the favorite, and I think that that's the wrong move, as I do like SIU Edwardsville right on the money line. As for this Edwardsville team, they've been able to do a really good job defensively. You take a look at what they've been able to do in terms of points per possession in a roadside-neutral venue. This is a top 35 team in all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, 20th, and overall their offense has not been great. 280th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but if you look at them away from home, they're actually averaging about 2.9 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and they do have Ring Malay, who I think is going to be the top scorer in this game. 17 points, 5.5 boards, steal per contest, shoots 33% from 3. It's an Edwardsville team that they leave something to be desired with regards to their interior offense. Or outside the top 250 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, but that said, they're going to have a lot of second and third chances. Now, to the credit of Morehead St, they've been a top 50 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, and at home that goes into the top 30, but that said, they allow for a lot of second and third chances as well. As they're about 336th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They allow opponents to grab 33.9% of their misses as an offensive rebound. You also have a nice point guard for this SIU Edwardsville team in Jack Champion, who's been able to give you 7 points, but throws in their steal and a half, 5 assists per game. It's an Edwardsville team that is a top 125 team in terms of generating turnovers, and for Morehead St, they are ranking about 350th in the country in terms of turnovers per possession in their home games. And for Morehead St, you've been able to get Davion Cunningham and George Marshall to get going. Both give you 12.9 points per contest. Between the two of them, they shoot about 33% from 3-point range, but for Morehead St, you really can't trust them with regards to their offense in general. They're outside the top 225 in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. That, coupled with their turnovers, are a big issue, and they are outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. bench as well. I do think that SIU Edwardsville, with the way that their defense is rock solid and the way that Edwardsville does a good job in terms of being able to slow things down. They're about 298th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Morehead St has actually bumped things up a little bit more at 216th in terms of total possessions per game, but it's slowed it way down in Ohio Valley Conference play. I think they get a slog, and Edwardsville being able to get the outright win. I did set Edwardsville as a 4-point favorite, so I'm taking Edwardsville on the money line, and I like the under. I did set my total at a 132. 785, 786. It's Oral Roberts on the road against South Dakota, and South Dakota is a 5.5 to a 6.5 point favorite. Your total on this game is between 151.5 to a 153.5. Seeing a 4.5 out there as well, and I'm willing to lay with South Dakota. I'd be willing to lay up to 5.5 with South Dakota. You got a pair of teams that are just not doing a great job defensively. South Dakota 320th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and you've got Oral Roberts currently 341st, and it's going to be interesting to see which of these teams is able to do a better job of taking care of the ball, as neither team is generating a lot of turnovers. Both of these teams outside the top 215 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but South Dakota after last year, they were doing a really good job in terms of taking care of the ball. Not so much a case this year, but they're still better than Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts 318th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. South Dakota more around about 246, but for South Dakota, having Cameron Fens, a true 7-footer that's able to give you 6+ rebounds per game, I think is going to be a big X factor against an Oral Roberts team that they're getting blown away on the glass. Oral Roberts outside the top 250 in terms of their overall rebound percentage. You have pretty much one guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, Alfred Neve, who's been able to supply 12.5 points, 5.5 boards. So that's around there, a 2.5 per contest as well, but you don't even have a lot of 3-point shooting with this team. You've got Luke Ray, who's been able to shoot 36% from 3, 6.5 points per contest, but among players that average at least 3 points per contest, he's the only guy that shoots above 34.1% from the outside. Your main scorer in Ty Harper comes over from Youngstown State, 15 points, pair of assists per contest, but he's only shooting about 31% from 3, and this team is getting bombed from 3. Oral Roberts is outside the top 3 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Now, it is a South Dakota team that's going to be looking to pile drive the ball down low a little bit more, but you've got the Bruns burner and Mr. Isaac Bruns, who's been supplying 20.5 points, 5 rebounds per contest, and it's a South Dakota team that has been a top 150 team with their 3-point shooting percentage overall, a top 175 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Fens also gives you a block and a half per contest. Jordan Crawford is able to shoot 36% from 3, 13.5 points per game. In a pressure spot, South Dakota, they shoot about 74.4%. The free throw line, top 100 mark there. I do think that they get the job done against the Oral Roberts team that's mid-tempo and just really sputtering on defense. I set my total out of 162, like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 5.5 with South Dakota, 787, 788. Georgia State is on the road against Louisiana, and Louisiana does find themselves as a home underdog here of 1.5 to 2 points. Total game 129.5 to a 131.5. Set Georgia State as 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number now. Georgia State has been less than tremendous with their offense. They're a mid-tempo team, about 144th in terms of total possessions per game. Louisiana is anything but that. Louisiana 363rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Louisiana doing a little bit of better job of taking care of the ball recently. They're up into the top 275 in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but you got a pair of teams that have not really executed on offense all season long in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. This Louisiana team checks in 347th in all of college basketball. Georgia State, even though it's a rough start to the season, they're now up to 331st, and if you look at them in conference play only, they've gotten past 72 points, and now 5 out of their last 8 games after they were dealing with an injury to their top scorer earlier in the season, and Jelani Hamilton, he's really kicked it into overdrive mode. 19.5 points, 4 boards, pair of steals, shoots 39% from 3 for a team that has been as rough as they have been with their offense. But if Georgia State is able to find a way to get to their free throw line, they're actually a top 10 team with this regard, shooting 78.5% at the free throw line. They're just really bad with their interior offense. They're a bottom 5 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, but top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, country average team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. I'm not saying that this Georgia State team by any stretch of the imagination is an amazing defense, and they're not going to put you under too much stress. They're a country average team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but I do think that they're going to be able to hold up here as they're actually a top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Louisiana, they're more around about 195th, and for Louisiana, it's just been a case where their main guy went down with an injury, and Jamarian Keller, he was coming in from Oklahoma State. He had scored 34 points in the first 2 games of the season, has not been seen since. So Dorian Finster, Jackson Oliveira are your lone 2 guys that give you over 8.1 points per contest. They're healthy. They combine for about 25.3 points per game, and Finster does shoot 38.5% from 3, but for Louisiana, they're about 340th 49th with regards to their two-point shooting percentage. So they're right there with Georgia State. They've been a little bit above country average in terms of guarding inside, but where they really get gash is with regards to their three-point shooting defense. This is a team that's allowing teams to shoot over 36% from three-point range right now. They are checking in 331st in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, with Georgia State not executing down low. I think that that's a big issue, and if this does turn out to be a tight game, this is a Georgia State team that's great at the free throw line with their 78.5%. Louisiana 67.7%, 317th. Joshua Lewis has been dealing with a little bit of an injury. That's their star freshman. Has been able to give them 8 points per contest. With them being out, I do think that Georgia State goes out there and gets the job done in a slog. I did set my total at a 129, so I'm willing to lay it here with Georgia State, and I'm in on the under as well. 789, 790. It's Abilene Christian playing us to Utah Tech. Utah Tech, a 2.5 to a 3.5 point underdog. Total on this game, 141.5. I did set Abilene Christian as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. For Utah Tech, they've been able to do a relatively okay job in terms of generating turnovers, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're about 131st, while Abilene Christian just continues to be that team that always generates the turnovers, top 15 team with this regard, but it's an Abilene Christian team that's really not executing on offense in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. This team is outside the top 300 in the country, and they just don't execute down low. They're about 326th in the country with this regard. Now, I will say this, Abilene Christian is a team that traditionally gives up a lot of second and third chances, and they've been much better on the defensive glass this season. They're now a top 120 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Utah Tech, they're giving up a lot of second and third chances. They allow opponents to grab about 32.5% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That is outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. And for Abilene Christian, you do have a nice headline scorer in Braden Hubbard, who's been giving the team 15 points, 5 boards, only shoots about 30.5% from three. In Abilene Christian, they're outside the top 250 with their own three-point shooting percentage. They also don't allow you to be able to get a lot of three-point looks. Now, they're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but they're a top 40 team in terms of forcing opponents to be able to take 2-point shots as well. And for Utah Tech, this unit has been rough with their three-point shooting, as they're only shooting about 32%. They're outside the top 250 in the country, and their forte on defense is being a top 50 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Now, on their 2-point shots, they are a top 100 team, so they're comfortable driving the ball down low. Ethan Potter has been able to give you about 16 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, and additionally, you've got Noah Belongo, comes over from St. Bonaventure with about 12.6 rebounds per game, but really the lone out of their top 4 scorers that shoots above 30.5% from three is Deshaun Holt. Does shoot 45% from three, 10.5 points per game, but is a team in Utah Tech that has been outside the top 225 in terms of ball security. Abilene Christian, they themselves have been turning the ball over a lot, so I do think that you get a sloppier, funky bunch game, and you don't even necessarily have two teams that really gun it. 160th in terms of total possessions range for Utah Tech, 234th with Abilene Christian, so set a total here of 138.5. I like the under end with Abilene Christian. Know that their offense has been sketchy. Do think that they get the job done. One to lay up to 4 here with Abilene Christian. 791, 792. It's Eastern Washington, and they're going to be on the road against Northern Arizona. Northern Arizona is a underdog here of 1.5 to 2 points. So on this game, 144.5 to 145.5. Me, Northern Arizona, the 1.5 point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. You got an Eastern Washington team that has had a difficult time taking care of the ball outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers per possession. They're about 200th in the country in terms of points per possession, and Northern Arizona, they've taken some big strides back with their offense. They're about 280th in terms of points per possession, but I will say this, they're averaging about 16 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than away from them. They do ascend into the top 250 with regards to their offensive efficiency when they are at home, and Northern Arizona shooting about from three, 35.5% from the outside. That's a top 100 mark, and for Eastern Washington, they shoot about 34.2% when they're away from home. So I did set a total here of a 151.5. I do like the overheads. Eastern Washington, they've slowed themselves down recently, but in games played away from home, top 100 team in terms of total possessions range. Northern Arizona is really slogging things down. They're about 321st in the country with this regard, and for Northern Arizona, they did have to replace a lot of pieces from a season ago, so they've been looking to just a mix mash of different guys to be able to step it up and try to be able to give this team a little bit of offensive production, as it's been Ryan Abelman and Zach Davidson who have been the main two guys. Davidson is supplying about 14 points, 5 rebounds per game, but has been dealing with a lot of injury recently. We haven't seen him over the last few weeks, and I don't think that he's going to be playing here. So that means that Abelman and Isaiah Shaw, who combine for about 20 points per contest, and between the two of them, they do shoot 38% from 3-point. They need to produce, but outside of Abelman, only guy that gives you more than 3.5 rebounds per game outside of him is Xavier Jackson, 7.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. But even with that, I'm willing to trust in Northern Arizona in this spot. I know that things have been a little bit bit less than tremendous without Davidson, but they're coming off of a nice win against Northern Colorado where they figured it out on offense with 81 points, and it is an Eastern Washington team that's truly getting gashed. They've got some of the more demonstrative home and road splits with regards to their defense in all of college basketball, but this is an Eastern Washington team that if you take a look at them overall, 321st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They give up 18.2 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. Bottom 25 team with regards to points per possession allowed away from home. Away from home, teams shoot over 38% from three-point range against them. They're outside the top 350 in opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but they've got Isaiah Moses, give you 18 points, shoots 37% from three. Emmanuel Marquette has been dealing with a little bit of injury, but when he's been active, 6 points on 41% three-point shooting, and should be good to go here, but has scored approximately 0 points in the last two games that he's played, and so that's a little bit less than amazing. Kyrie Huey, Elton Hamilton combined for about 10.5 rebounds per game, but I mean, these are two of the only three guys on the roster that give you over 3 rebounds per game, and I do think that in the end, Northern Arizona gets it done against an Eastern Washington team that's both not taking care of the ball and it's just really bleeding points away from home. So I said my total 151.5. I'm in on the over end with Northern Arizona taking a shot on them on the money line, made them the 1.5 point favorite. 783, 794 on the card. It is Appalachian State, and they're going to be on the road against Southern Miss. Southern Miss is a favorite in most spots as a 1.5 point, seeing one out there as well in a few spots. 132.5 is the total, and made my total of 132. So 132.5 is my minimum buy point on the under. You're just not going to get a lot of possessions in this game. Appalachian State 352nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Southern Miss, they're a country average team, more around about 156th, and Southern Miss not really executing on offense. They're on 46th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. It's an Appalachian State team that has been a top 75 team in terms of taking care of the ball. They just don't really hit shots. 224th in terms of their points per possession, and here's the biggest reason why I'm going to be willing to lay with Southern Miss. And I recognize that Southern Miss is not necessarily the world's greatest free throw shooting team themselves. They're about 134th, 73.7%, neither here nor there. Appalachian State out of 365 Division I teams, 365th at 61.6%. When you find yourself in a tight line like this, that is a big, giant factor. And for Appalachian State, this team should be able to do a solid job on the glass because you got Luke Wilson, no, not the guy from old school, giving you about 10.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. Kassan Jennings, along with Alonzo Dodd in the backcourt, have been able to combine for about 26.5 points per game. They combine to shoot about 33% from three-point range. And for Appalachian State, while they do a nice job taking care of the ball, they're also outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. That should help out a Southern Miss team that has had a little bit of a difficulty in terms of taking care of the ball. Now, Southern Miss has been a top 150 team in terms of just being able to generate second and third chances in terms of offensive rebound percentage, even with the injury to Isaac Tavares as their number 2 scorer, and really was one of their top rebounders with about 6.7 rebounds per game. But in the absence, Dejai Benoit, who comes over from Elkhorn State, he's been able to give you 10.7 rebounds per game. Luke Wilkes has been able to give you about 18 points. Now, he doesn't shoot it well from three, and Southern Miss, their kryptonite is three-point shooting. They're about 355th in the country, shooting 29% from three. Country average team down low with their 2-point shooting percentage, but they've also been a top 175 team in terms of generating turnovers. They're weakest around the outside. They're outside the top 290 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but they do a nice job inside it with Appalachian State having their own 3-point shooting difficulties. I do think that that's going to be able to win out in this spot, and really both of these teams have been pretty solid with regards to their interior defense. Southern Miss is a team that ranks 112th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but if you look at their home games and their home games only, they're a top 25 team with that regard. Meanwhile, for Appalachian State, they find themselves 29th in the country in opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So, in on the under, somebody told 132, and it will lay up to 1.5 here with Southern Miss, 785, 786. Utah Valley is on the road against Tarleton State, and Tarleton State is a home underdog here as you're catching between 4.5 to 5.5 points with them. Total on this game, 156.5 to 157.5, and I made a total of 154. I'm in on the under. Now, Tarleton State has been really looking to crank up their tempo in terms of total possessions per game. This is as fast as they have played in quite some time. 34th in the country. Utah Valley's up to 84th, but both of these teams do very much pride themselves on defense. For Tarleton, top 3 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Now, that's a little bit at the, shall we say, peril of their 2-point shooting percentage defense. They're 353rd in the country with that regard. And Utah Valley has been pretty solid on the inside. They're 105th in opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. That's big because Tarleton State actually leads the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. But with Utah Valley, what has been an issue for them? Taking care of the ball. 344th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. In games played away from home, it actually gets even worse for them as they do check in outside the top 350 with that regard. And for Utah Valley, you've got Trayvon Leonard, who's done a nice job in the backcourt, giving you over 5 assists per contest, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and he's been your number 3 scorer with about 11.5 points per contest. And then Tyler Hendricks, he shoots 45% from 3 with 12 points per contest. Jackson Olcombe, he does a bit of everything, 17.7 boards, 3.5 assists, 2 steals over a block per contest. But For Utah Valley, they're a country average team with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. Utah Valley, very solid on the glass. They're a top 75 team in terms of their overall rebound percentage, but with Charleston, they've also got Dior Johnson, who's been coming in off the bench, giving this team darn near 23.5 points per contest. And for Tarleton, even though they don't attempt a lot of threes, they do shoot about 33.5% from three-point range. Tarleton has been a okay team in terms of guarding the arc country average, with opponents shooting about 34% from three-point range. Tarleton State, a top 225 team with regards to rebound percentage, not quite as good as Utah Valley, but they'll be able to hold up there. You've got Freddie Hicks, who's been able to spy about 11 points, 6 rebounds per game. Kristen Backba has done a solid job on the boards, and always have to check in on this Tarleton State injury report, because out of their top 6 scorers, they've had only one guy miss fewer than 3 games thus far this season, so they have been very much a banged up bunch. They should be mostly good to go in this game, though, and for Tarleton State, I do think that they're going to hold in there at home. I do think that in the end, Utah Valley is going to be able to get the job done, but if it does come down to free throws, Tarleton State, top 50 team and getting to the free throw line, they shoot 76% at the free throw line. It is a Utah Valley team that will put you on the free throw line, and Utah Valley shoots more around 70.2% at the free throw line. So it's at a total of 154. I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take anything above 2 here with Tarleton, 797, 798. Memphis is playing host to Florida Atlantic, and Florida Atlantic is a underdog here of 1.5 to 2.5 points, and your total, you're going to be getting that at a 150.5 to a 151.5, and I like Florida Atlantic here on the money line. This Memphis team has just been very, very awful this far this season. I wish I could put it any other way. If it wasn't for the brand name of Memphis, I'm pretty sure that they would be the underdog in this ordeal, as you had a Memphis team that's just not taking care of the ball, and that's been a hallmark of Penny Hardaway's era here in Memphis, as in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they're currently checking in outside the top 340 in all of college basketball. They overall are 314th in terms of points per possession at home, and they're giving up second and third chances. They allow opponents to grab 33.1% of their misses as an offensive rebound, 326th in the country, and Florida Atlantic, away from home, they grab about 32.5% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That is a top 50 mark in the country, and Florida Atlantic has gotten some good production. The two Devons, Devin Williams, 7.5 points, 2.5 blocks, 5 rebounds per game. Devin Vanderpool, top scorer, 16 points, steal and a half, throws in their 6.5 boards. He shoots 36% for 3. Kenny Carlisle can be a little bit all over the place with his 3-point shooting, but does give you about 15 points per game. It is a Florida Atlantic team that does leave themselves a little bit vulnerable from the outside, back outside the top 200 with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, but top 100 team on the inside. They're doing a great job with regards to rebound front. They will turn the ball over about 12 times per game, and that's an issue because Memphis has been a top 60 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, as you've got Doug McDaniel doing a bit of everything, 2 steals, 5 assists, 13.5 points, shoots 37% for 3, but McDaniel is right now your lone double-figure scorer. You've had a lot of injured guys be able to come back, Hassan Abdul-Hakim, Curtis Givens, Julius Stredford. These are all guys giving between about 6 to 9.5 points per game, and they all missed at least 5 games this season, so they're looking to build a little bit of chemistry, but it's just not working. They're outside the top 250 with their 3-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 275 with their 2-point shooting percentage. They've been able to guard the arc relatively well, but this is a Florida Atlantic team that they're perfectly fine going down low. It's been a relatively okay shot blocking team, and our organizer Aaron Bradshaw has had a few okay performances, but he's been a big giant flop as a former top 10 recruit. 8 points, 4 rebounds per game. You just expect a little bit more there, and with this Memphis team in a tight spot, they shoot 69% of the free throw line. That's also outside the top 275 in all of college basketball. Florida Atlantic more around 72.5%. I trust in Florida Atlantic to get the job done, and with the way that Memphis is not executing at home, I recognize that they're a top 85 team in terms of total possessions per game. Florida Atlantic look at a push tempo at 67th in the country, but that said, I did set my total more around a 148.5, so I'm in on the under, and Florida Atlantic on the money line, 799, 800 on the card. It's Penn State. They're going to be on the road against Northwestern. Northwestern is a favorite of 8.5 to 8 points on this game. It is 149.5, and I said Northwestern has an 8.5 point favorite, so willing to lay up to 8 with them. It's not a pair of teams that's looking to really gun it with regards to their tempo. This Northwestern team, 281st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Penn State, 280th. So two very similar teams there, and it's a Northwestern team that they just pride themselves on doing the little things. They're a top 5 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, top 100 free throw shooting team. It's a Penn State team that they've been just really unable to execute things down low, as it's a Penn State team that they themselves are a top 35 team in terms of taking care of the ball, in terms of their ball security, and they've been 64th in the country with their own 2-point shooting percentage, but they're well outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and the one thing that Northwestern has been able to do a good job of is guarding the arc. They're a top 40 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They do get cash a little bit on the inside, about 130th with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. That said, this is a Penn State team that does not have a single player on the roster that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, and for Northwestern, I recognize that they're not necessarily just absolutely banging things up on the glass or anything themselves. They're outside the top 175 with regards to rebound percentage, but Nick Martinelli should be able to win that battle down low. 23.5 points, 6.5 boards, shoots 48% from three. And then Jalen Reed, he's been able to throw in there like 5 assists, 11 points per contest. Arrington Page gives you about 5.5 rebounds per game. So Northwestern should be able to do a great job there, and it is a Northwestern team that's about country average in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, for Penn State, they do a good job in terms of taking care of the ball with having a pair of guys in Malai Tunka along Kaden Mingo lead the backcourt. For Tunka, shoots 36.5% for three, 9.5 points, 2.5 assists per game. Mingo, 2 steals, 5 assists, 14 points per game, and it is still a bunch that has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of generating turnovers. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a vintage Mike Rhodes team, but in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, Penn State hovering right around by the 84th in the country with this regard. Northwestern, they're down with this regard at a 227th mark, but still for Penn State, you got Freddie De Leon, give you 13.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game, and then you've got Ivan Jurcic. He's the lone guy on the roster that gives you over 4 rebounds per game. He throws in their 9 points per contest. I do think that Penn State is just going to get it taken to them down low. It's going to be an efficient game with regards to not a lot of turnovers, but that said, I do think that for Penn State, they just continue to get completely blasted down low, and Northwestern is able to win from within, and even though it's going to be low possession, I think that it's going to be, shall we say, very efficient on offense. So I did some by total 152.5 like the over, and with Northwestern, I'm willing to lay up to 8 with them. 801, 802, it is Utah. They're on the road against UT Arlington. UT Arlington is an 8.5 point favorite. 142.5 is the total, and with UT Arlington, I made them a 10.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. UT Arlington actually leads the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. Defense, you've got a Southern Utah team that they are looking to have teams pile drive the ball down low. They're a top 30 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 2-point range, but away from home, they are well outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so they're not even doing a great job defensively there, and this is a Southern Utah team that may have been about 277th in the country with their 3-point shooting percentage, and they're just not the same team away from home. They shoot 38.7% from 3-point range when they're at home. Away from home, that goes down to 28.4%, and it's not a team that's executing down low. With a bunch that is looking to have you pile drive the ball down low, Southern Utah is outside the top 215 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Now, UT Arlington has been a rough offense to say the least. They're outside the top 350 in terms of ball security. They themselves are outside the top 275 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage at home, but that said, this is a UT Arlington team that they've been able to do an okay job in terms of generating a few turnovers as well, 80th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and for a UT Arlington team which are kryptonite is turnovers, it's good that they see a Southern Utah team as 320th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. UT Arlington is going to need to really focus on Jaden Farrow, as he's been very good for this Southern Utah team. About 2 blocks, a steal, 7 boards, shoots 42% for 3 with 14 points per contest. Elijah Duvall, Dylan Jones, they combine for about 23 points per contest, and Jones has been able to shoot 37% from 3-point range, but it is a Southern Utah team that does find themselves outside the top 185 with regards to their rebound percentage as well. And for UT Arlington, you do have Rayshawn Semester, who I think is going to be able to do a nice job down low for this team, as he's been supplying 13 plus points. He's able to throw in there 6 plus rebounds per game as well. And then on the backcourt side of things, you've had Marcel McCreary be the main guy for this team, as he headlines a team that shoots very badly from 3-point range, 30.9%. They're outside the top 3 with that regard, but he's been able to shoot 38% from 3. Gives you about 13.5 points, 5 boards, nearly 2 steals per contest as well. Marcus Rigsby, who comes over from Troy, he's been able to supply about 5.5 points, just under a steal per contest. I do think that UT Arlington being able to be country average with regards to free throw shooting percentage at 72%, and the fact that they do get there quite often, I think is going to be just enough to be able to win out in this spot. And for this Southern Utah team, they're going to be held down by an Arlington team that has been a top 125 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. So did set a total here of a 142.5 right now. I'm mostly seeing 142, 142.5, 142 or less, in on the over 143.5 or higher. Going to be in on the under, so we'll be waiting on a little bit of line movement there, but we'll lay up to 10 here with Arlington, 803, 804. North Dakota is going to be on the road against St. Thomas. St. Thomas, a 12.5 point favorite. Total game between 153.5 to 154. When St. Thomas was on the road against North Dakota, they were like a 10.5 point road favorite. Now they're a 12.5 point favorite at home. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm going to be willing to lay with St. Thomas. I did set them as a 15.5 point favorite. Home court advantage means much more than what they're leading on here. And for North Dakota, they continue to be a masterful team in terms of generating turnovers, in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis in a road or neutral court venue. They've been a top 20 team in all of college basketball. Here's the issue, though. St. Thomas really doesn't turn the ball over. This St. Thomas team is about 40th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers turnovers on a per possession basis. And if you look at it just strictly in their home games, that goes into the top 25. It's a St. Thomas team that's been a little bit sketchy with their three-point shooting, but now they're back to about country average. They're 68th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and North Dakota has seen a fall off with their offense away from home. Away from home, they average about 15 points fewer per 100 possessions, and when they're at home, they're overall 221st in the country in terms of points per possession, and they're outside the top 255 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, because North Dakota essentially sells out for turnovers. They find themselves outside the top 3 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Now, to the credit of North Dakota, they're not going to give up a lot of second and third chances, and it's a St. Thomas team that they're already living without him. St. Thomas is a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage. You've got Eli King for this North Dakota team, give you 12 points, 2.5 steals, 5 boards, so he's been a bit of a do-it-all guy. And Grayson Ullman, 14 points. He shoots about 35.5% from 3, and Zach Kraft has been crafty. He was shooting 44% from the outside, but team shoots about 34% from 3. That's country average. They're outside the top 250 with their 2-point shooting percentage, and they do look to drive the ball down low a little bit more. To the credit of North Dakota, top 100 team in terms of taking care of the ball, but for St. Thomas, you just have weapons upon weapons in this backcourt, with Nolan Minsale being your top guy, 20 points, 4.5 assists. He only shoots about 30% from 3, but Nick Jankowski, he's shooting 36% from 3 with 16.5 points per contest. Overall for the season, St. Thomas shoots 35.4% from 3, but in conference play, that has gone up to 39.7% from the outside. Ben Oosterbaan, along with Carter Bejerke, they combine for about 16 points per game. Between the two of them, you get about 7 boards, and you've got Bejerke shooting 42% from 3-point. It's the St. Thomas team that they themselves have been a top 150 team in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis on defense. They're a top 225 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and I think that they're efficient enough to be able to get the job done in a game that should feature plenty of possessions. North Dakota about 130th in terms of total possessions per game. St. Thomas out playing at warp speed, but still 152nd with this regard, so I do think that you get plenty of good looks, and when some of these two teams play, both teams got well past 80, so somebody total of 155.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 15 here with St. Thomas, 805, 806. Coastal Carolina is on the road against South Alabama. South Alabama is a 5.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 137.5, and made South Alabama the 7-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay this number. It is a South Alabama team that's had a little bit of a tough time being able to execute on offense at home. At home, they are outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and for this Coastal Carolina team, it has been a little bit hot and cold for them as well. This is a Coastal team that finds themselves 271st in the country in terms of points per possession, and they only shoot 30.8% from 3-point range away from home, and that's an issue because South Alabama, and I'm not even kidding when I say this, they force opponents to take 68.5% of their field goal attempts from 3-point range in their home games. So you have to shoot threes to be able to put points up on the board, and for this Coastal Carolina team, that's been an issue. You do have A.J. Dantzler along with Rashid Jones, who will be able to combine for about 38.5% 3-point shooting. Between the two of them, they do give you over 30 points per game, and then Joshua Beadle, your main scorer, 17 points, 3 assists per contest. He shoots more like 25% from 3-point range. It's not a Coastal team that is really like going bombs away from 3, but at the same time, they're not uncomfortable shooting 3. Coastal, they're not going to generate any turnovers. They're a bottom 10 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, while it's the South Alabama team that they're very good in terms of taking care of the ball and winning that turnover battle. South Alabama 25th in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, right around about 97th in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis on defense, and it is a South Alabama team that they do look to pile drive the ball down low a little bit more on offense rather than defense. As for South Alabama, they've been a country average team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and for Coastal, they're actually a very good team with regards to shooting percentages. They are 14th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're not quite as dominant in terms of being able to guard the 3-point line, but even still, with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, they've been able to do a solid job holding up there. They're about 103rd in all of college basketball, and that goes to 31.9% away from home, so I think they get a slog of a game. South Alabama, about 258th in terms of total possessions per game. I did set a total of 131. I'm going to be in on the under, but I'm going to be willing to lay with South Alabama, given that you've been able to have Chaz Harris step up with about 18 points, 5 boards, 4.5 assists per game. South Alabama only shoots about 33.5% from 3-point range. They are, ironically enough, a top 50 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. So they are very much looking to drive the ball down low, but they do a nice job valuing possessions, and they don't put you on the free throw line. They're a top 5 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis. Now, in a tight spot, they only shoot 67% at the free throw line, but I do think that this bunch going to be able to do a nice job taking it to a Coastal Carolina team that's not going to put them under duress, and I do think that South Alabama controls the tenor of this game. Set my line at 7. One to lay is South Alabama, and I'm in on the under. Set my total 131. 8:07, 8:08 on the card. It is Little Rock. They're going to be on the road against Tennessee State. Tennessee State does find themselves as a mid-tier favorite, as you're going to be laying with them between 5.5 to 6 points. Total is 156.5, and I do like the under. I set my total at a 149.5. You have a Little Rock team that is really not looking to push pace whatsoever, 275th in terms of total possessions per game. Tennessee State, they are looking to push pace. They are 42nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Tennessee State, an improved offense from a season ago. They're up to about 212th in terms of points per possession. Little Rock, they're just not able to keep possessions clean. They're right now 284th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. This despite the fact that this is a Little Rock team that actually shoots it relatively okay from three-point range. They're actually 48th in the country, shooting 36.6% from three, albeit goes down to about 34.9% away from them. But here's the issue. Turnovers. They turn the ball over on 21.8% of their possessions when they're away from home. That is a bottom 15 mark in all of college basketball. And Tennessee State, they've had a few turnover woes themselves, but they actually do a really, really good job of keeping it clean at home. All their turnover woes come from away from home, as at home, Tennessee State has actually become a top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and that's a big reason why I did set them here as a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay that number, as Tennessee State has gotten a lot of production out of Travis Harper and Aaron Nabakura. Nabakura, about 17 points, 3 assists, 3 steals, 5 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from 3. Harper shoots 39.5% from 3. Now, Tennessee State not going to light it up from 3. They're outside the top 270 with this regard, 31.8%, but they are a team that's looking to drive the ball down low, top 30 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range, and on top of Little Rock just not being able to take care of the ball in general, it is the Tennessee State team that's been solid in terms of generating turnovers, 54th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. It's a Little Rock team that they've been good themselves. They're right around about 60th in the country, but it's also a Little Rock team that has been very suspect in terms of their defensive rebound percentage as well, 340th with this regard. They allow opponents to grab 34.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Additionally, you've got a Tennessee State team that's solid in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, top 155 team with that regard. They actually grab fewer second chances at home rather than away from home, but you still have quite a few guys who are very capable here, like a Jalen Petrie, who's able to give you 6.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Carlos Williams has some size as well, and for Little Rock, they might have actually the best player out there on the floor, as you've been able to have Chandler Lawson do a nice job headlining things with 17 points, right around about 4 boards, 4 assists, shoots 38% from 3, and Kachi Nizai has been able to give you about 12 points. He shoots 46% from 3, but even though Little Rock shoots it well from 3, they're looking to drive the ball down low. They're a team that ranks in the top 100 with regards to percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range, and they're outside the top 270 in terms of both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You get this team on the free throw line. Little Rock outside the top 330 at 66.9% at the charity stripe. It's a Little Rock team that's just not doing a whole heck of a lot well. I do think that the turnovers cost you in over, so my total at 149.5. I like the under. And with the Tennessee State team, I'm a little late. I did set them as a favorite of 9.5 points, 809. 8-10 on the card. It is UT Martin on the road against Eastern Illinois. Eastern Illinois is a underdog here of 4.5 points. It's all scheme 126 to 126.5, and for Eastern Illinois, I did set them as an underdog of 3.5 points. So here at the 4+, I'm going to be willing to take those points. You've got a UT Martin team that's just had a really tough time taking care of the ball, 355th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and if you space it out and look at it just in a road/score venue, bottom 3 mark in all of college basketball, Eastern Illinois has had their own turnover issues at about 325th, and this is a UT Martin team that is a top 60 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and Eastern Illinois, they're just 353rd with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, but it is a UT Martin team that they themselves have been very hot and cold with regards to their own offense as well, so I'm going to be one to take the points with Eastern Illinois. And additionally for Eastern Illinois, one of their main guards was out to begin the season as Andre 3000 Washington, who comes over from LIU, Long Island, has been able to give you about 11.5 points per contest and has really been able to elevate this offense. Now Zion Brewster has been a little bit in and out of the lineup, but should be good to go in this one. He's been supplying 15.5 points. Only shoots about 32% from 3, but does make about 86% of his free throws as well for a Eastern Illinois team that really just doesn't have a lot of rebounding to speak of. They've been outside the top 225 with this regard. Cooper Jacoby, one guy on the roster that really gives you over 5.5 rebounds per game, 10.6 boards. And then you do have Terry McMorris, who gives you a block, 5.4 boards, 6.8 points per game. So those guys have been relatively okay. Nobody else gives you over 4 rebounds per game, but with this Eastern Illinois team. They do a great job in terms of guarding the arc themselves. If you include non-D1 games, they're actually a top 15 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but overall, they have been a top 50 team with this regard, and it's a UT Martin team that has been a little bit rudderless and strange with the way that they've been trying to execute on offense because they've had so many different injuries. That's not even funny. Your main constants have been Mateus Denias along with Andrei Bronkovic. These two guys have been able to combine for about 28 points per contest. You've got Mr. Mateus shooting about 32% from three, and Brahmovic has been able to throw in there 8.5 boards, shoots 42% per three, and it is a UT Martin team that has been solid with regards to offensive rebound percentage. They're a top 45 team with this regard. They take quite a few threes, though. They're a top 100 team in terms of percentage of their shots that do come from three-point range, and they are a team that they try to get to the free throw line as well. They've been a top 100 team in terms of free throws on a per possession basis, but they only shoot about 31.3% from three and 67.9% the free throw line outside the top 285 with both regards there. It is a Martin team that has been a top 125 team in terms of generating turnovers, and they are a top 75 team in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage, but I do think that this is going to be very much a sloppy game. Neither of these teams are looking to push any sort of tempo whatsoever. UT Martin is about 277 in terms of total possessions per game. Eastern Illinois, 270, so set a very low total here of a 129.5. I think that we've perhaps gone a skoge too low. I do think that Eastern Illinois is going to be able to find a way to get inside, and I do think that you get some late game falling for the over, so I'm in on the over, but at 4+, won't think of some points with Eastern Illinois. 8-11, 8-12, it's Lindenwood on the road against Southern Indiana. Southern Indiana does find themselves as a home dog of 4 to 4.5 points. 148.5 is the total, and for Lindenwood, I did set them as a favorite of 5.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 4 to 4.5. It is a Lindenwood team that's not been able to execute with their three-point shooting percentage. They're back outside the top 3 are there, but they are giving themselves some second and third chances. Top 135 team in terms of percentage of their misses that result in an offensive rebound, and you got a Southern Indiana team that has just really not been great on offense. They are outside the top 320 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Both teams hovering right around about 175th and 185th in terms of defensive rebound percentage, so they're not doing a terrible job there, but you're not going to get any sort of three-point shooting in this game. Right now for Lindenwood, as I mentioned, 357th with their three-point shooting percentage. That is 22.9% away from home. That is bottom 3 in all of college basketball. Louisiana Tech actually shoots 19.7% from the outside, but that said, Southern Indiana, they're 328th in the country with their three-point shooting percentage, and it's a Southern Indiana team that's been doing a better job in terms of taking care of the ball, but Lindenwood is the far superior team in terms of generating turnovers. Southern Indiana, 234th. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, Lindenwood, they're checking in more around about 98th, and Lindenwood, I do think, is going to be able to do the better job with regards to their low post offense, as Southern Indiana also outside the top 3 with their two-point shooting percentage. Lindenwood, they do find themselves in the top 150, as you've got Jadis Jones, Aeneas Futrell combining for 33.2 points per contest, and Futrell shoots 36.5% for three. Pretty much the only guy outside of Jeremiah Tilton, who's been missing for half the season, shooting above 32% from three-point range, but you've got Dontrez Williams giving you about 15 points, generates about 2.5 steals per contest. It's a Lindenwood team that has been a top 150 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, or a top 100 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and for Southern Indiana, this is not a team that can be trusted if you get them to the free throw line. Right now, they're shooting 64.7% of the charity stripe. That is a bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball. They're about 300th with their three-point shooting percentage, outside the top 340 with their two-point shooting percentage. Ismail El-Habib along Cardell Bailey combined for 31 points per game, and for Bailey, he does shoot 35% from three. They throw in there combined about 10 rebounds per game. Amari Brown has been dealing with a lot of injury, and when he's been out there, he's been able to give you 14 points per contest and should be good to go in this game. So he does provide a little bit more pop for the Southern Indiana team, especially with how bad their three-point shooting is, but that said, for Southern Indiana, you do have a guy in Tolu Samuels who's been able to give you 8 rebounds per game. That helps out a little bit down low, but just the lack of execution on offense is very glaring, and it's a Southern Indiana team that, if you look overall for the season, they've been a relatively up-tempo team, 83rd in terms of total possessions per game, but have slowed themselves down in conference play. Lindenwood, they're actually 19th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but again, they're not necessarily the most offensive-oriented team either. They're not necessarily executing the best, but do think that Lindenwood gets the job done in a game that it features lots of missed shots. Semi-total at a 145.5 in on the under, and 108.5 here with Lindenwood. 8-13, 8-14 on the card. Southeast Missouri State is going to be on the road against Western Illinois. Western Illinois is a home dog of 8.5 points. 140.5 is the total, and I like the under. I saw my total 135.5. You got a Western Illinois team that is very much not looking to push pace right now. 272nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Southeast Missouri State a little bit more of a mid-tempo team, 133rd, but if you look at them in conference play, they've been well outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game since this started, and it's a Southeast Missouri State team that they do do a few things relatively well. One of the biggest things is they generate turnovers. In terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, this is a top 100 team in all of college basketball, and they're really not going to allow a ton of second and third chances. It's a Western Illinois team that when they've been at their peak, they've been able to do a solid job in terms of being able to grab second and third chances, with Southeast Missouri State about 120th with regards to defensive rebound percentage. Western Illinois, they're giving up tons of second chances. They are 332nd with this regard. Now, we'll say for Southeast Missouri State, they're not necessarily grabbing for themselves a lot of second and third chances outside the top 250 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, and in a tight spot, this team shoots at 67.5% the free throw line, as Big Reason why semi-line at 7.5, so at 8+, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Western Illinois. For Southeast Missouri State, you do have a pair of guys in the backcourt, Luke Almendover along with Braxton Secker, that combine for 28.6 points per game, but both shoot between 33.5% and 34.5% from three, and you've been able to have Brandon Terry shoot 40% from three, but it's on low volume, 10 points per contest, throws in their 5 boards. Marquise Bell has been able to give 5 rebounds per game. It's a whole is greater than some of its parts sort of collective. And for Southeast Missouri State, top 225 team, it turns both opponents 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Not necessarily going to knock your socks off, but at the same time doing a relatively okay job. And for Western Illinois, you do have the Idaho State transfer in Isaiah Griffin, who's been able to do a nice job with 12 points, shoots 37% from three. He is like the lone guy on the roster that shoots about 32.5% from three. Is Lucas Lorenzen, your top scorer, 15 points, 4 boards. He shoots only about 29.5% from three. Western Illinois, they're outside the top 330 in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Top 225 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but also turning the ball over quite a bit. They're not generating a lot of turnovers themselves. One thing they've been able to do a relatively okay job of is their interior defense. They've been a top 275 team with that regard. In the end, though, I just don't really trust in the Southeast Missouri State team as well with their offense, and them being such a bad free throw shooting team. Western Illinois, they themselves shoot 67.5% of the free throw line. I think that causes for a lower scoring game. I mean, on the underside, my total 135.5, and we'll take A+ here with Western Illinois, 815, 816. UNC Wilmington is on the road against Towson, and Towson does find themselves as a home favorite here of 1.5 to 2.5 points. 132.5 to 131.5 is the total line. I made Wilmington the 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them, as both of these teams have one very clear strength. They're both very good on glass. Wilmington is 20th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Towson is 37th, but if you look at games played away from home, Wilmington, they allow opponents to grab 21.1% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That is actually number 3 in all of college basketball when they're away from home, and this is a Towson group that you've got Tyler Tejada along Dylan Williamson, who have been able to combine for over 29 points per contest. They've been your main 2 scorers, but this team just simply can't shoot. They're a bottom 15 team in all of college basketball in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, and I recognize that UNC Wilmington might not go into flamethrower mode, but they're more of a top 175 team. They shoot about 34.5% from 3. Nolan Hodge has been able to do a nice job leading things with 15 points, 5 boards, shoots 38.5% from 3-point. Patrick Wessler does not shoot 3, so he's a 7-footer that comes over from Virginia Tech, but 13.5 points, 9 boards, gives you a little bit over a block per contest, and it's a Towson team that their forte is really not allowing good 3-point looks, and it's the same for Wilmington. Both of these teams are top 50 teams in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and it comes down to which team is able to guard the inside a little bit more, because both of these teams, they do have their, shall we say, hits and misses with regards to their offensive production and their defensive production, and for Towson, they're not a team that's going to put you under duress outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Wilmington team that's outside the top 275 as well, but Wilmington, they're hovering right around about 114th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Towson is 293rd, and I think that that's going to be a big X factor here. Additionally, it's a Wilmington team that they shoot about 69.7% at the free throw line, and that's less than tremendous. Towson, not necessarily a team that is very sure-handed at the free throw line either, at 69.9%. And then outside of Tejada and Williamson, Jack Dombia, he gives you about 10.5 points. He throws in there about 5 rebounds per contest, but you really just don't have a lot of 3-point shooting on this team. Jaden Cole has been dealing with injury, so that's been really hurting them. It is a Towson team that has been able to do a rock-solid job on defense, and both of these teams are going to be looking to play at a very slow and controlled pace. Towson right now, 349th in terms of total possessions per game. Wilmington a little bit better, but they're 319, so I think they get a slog. You get 2 teams that are very similar, but with Wilmington having the better 3-point shooting and just the overall better offense, I do think that they find a way to get the job done on the road. So by total 129.5, I'm in on the under, and Wilmington on the money line, 817, 818. It is Idaho. They're going to be on the road against Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado is a 2.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 152.5 to 153.5, and I do like the over. So by total 154.5. Got a Northern Colorado team that's not shy to run. They're 75th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Idaho's faster than they have been in past years as well. They're about 173rd in the country with regards to total possessions per game, and Idaho's an improved defense. They're about a country average team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. It is a Northern Colorado team that they do give it up on the inside. They're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but for Northern Colorado, they should be able to find some good looks from three-point range. The kryptonite for Idaho has been for a very long time three-point shooting defense. They are allowing teams to shoot right in that neighborhood about 34.5% from three. That's outside the top 218 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, Northern Colorado, they actually do a great job with regards to perimeter defense, 75th in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and both of these teams are really good in terms of not allowing second and third chances. This Idaho team, 67th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but Northern Colorado, they one up them. Northern Colorado, 22nd in the country, only about 23.9% of opponents' missed shots do become an offensive rebound, and Northern Colorado just has a little bit more star power, in my opinion. You've got Quinn Dinker, who began his career, ironically enough, over at Idaho, and he's become the main facilitator, 6.8 assists, 17.5 points, shoots only about 32.5% from three, but Zach Block shoots 47% from three with 13 points per game. Brock Wisney, 16 points, 6 boards, 3 assists. He shoots 40% from three-point range. You've been able to have a few guys that have been able to mix and shake, like a Vincent Delano, who's been able to come over from Portland. He's been able to give you a pair of assists per contest, throws in their 7 points per game. And then for Idaho, they've been dealing with a few injuries throughout the season, but main two guys out there in the backcourt have been Biko Johnson along with Colton Mitchell. They combine for just under 28 points per game, and you've been able to have Jackson Rasmussen also do a nice job down low with about 5 boards, 14 points, and with Biko Johnson along with Colton Mitchell, they combine to shoot about 35% from three-point range. For Idaho, even though they do such a great job on the defensive glass, the one guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game is Brody Woodbury with about 6 rebounds per game, but for Idaho, I do fear that this team just not necessarily being one that really forces the issue and being one that puts you on the free throw line. They're outside the top 225 in terms of free throws allowed on a per possession basis. Going to be a little bit costlier for Northern Colorado. They're a top 75 team with regards to their free throw shooting percentage. Northern Colorado also executes really well on the inside, top 50 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Not a lot of turnovers to be had. Northern Colorado, they're outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Idaho's not forcing the issue either, so set a total of 154.5 in on the overhand with Northern Colorado. We'll lay up to 6 with them. 819, 820 on the card. It's Washington on the road against Illinois. The Fighting Illini are a double-figure favorite here of 12.5 to 13 points. 152.5 to 153 is the total line. Set a total of 152.5, so 153 plus. I'm going to be in on the under. Now for Washington, they finally were able to find some three-point shooting in that game against Oregon. I think that just speaks how bad this Oregon team is. As for Washington, overall for the season, 288th in three-point shooting percentage at 31.4%. That goes down to 29.7% away from home, and it's an Illinois team that's much improved with their overall efficiency. They are shooting about 36% for three, top 70 mark now. They are dealing with the injury to Kylan Boswell, and for Illinois, they've actually really slowed down their tempo this year. In terms of total possessions per game, they're checking in right around about 297th in all of college basketball. Washington, they're neither fast nor slow. They're about 143rd in terms of total possessions per game, but they've been dealing with a lot of injuries. Wesley Yates has just been in and out of the lineup. I would assume they should be good to go here, but I don't think that he's going to be anywhere near 100%. Desmond Claude is just out until further notice. On Steinbeck, he's been able to do a nice job, 17.5 points, about 11 rebounds per game, and then front end Keppenhag throws in their 7 rebounds per game. These are the lone 2 guys on the roster, though, that give you over 4.2 rebounds per game, and that number 3 rebounder, Bryson Tucker's out with injury. Lathon Somerville has been dealing with injury. It's just been a big, giant mismatch for this team, and they're not going to put you under duress. Neither of these teams are. Both of these teams are outside the top 310 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Now, to the credit of Washington, top 125 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but they do give up quite a bit on the inside, and even though Illinois is a much improved 3-point shooting team, they also do a nice job down low with having David Marosic give you 12 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. Tomislav Ivicic has just with injury throughout the season, 10 points, 5 boards, so he's been a little bit of a disappointment, but Andrei Stojakovic, he's picking things up with Boswell currently being out the full 14 points. He's only shot 26.5% from 3-point range this season. I do fully expect that to go northward, but Keaton Wagler, how about him giving you 17.5 points, shoots 43.5% from 3-point range. It's an Illinois group that has been just really good with regards to their overall efficiency. They're a top 5 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. When they get to the free throw line, they're a top 10 team with their free throw shooting percentage, top 40 team in opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, top 100 team in opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. I think that Illinois does a good job just sucking the life out of Washington, a team that has to deal with a lot of pressure and a lot of just travel in general, and get the job done. I did set my line of 14.5. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 14 with Illinois, and I'm going to be in on the under. Set by total 152.5, 821, 822. Cal Poly is on the road against Cal State Bakersfield. Meet the Roadrunners find themselves as a 1.5 point favorite. It's all in game 162.5 to 163.5. I made Cal Poly a 7.5 point favorite. I like Cal Poly here outright on the money line for this Bakersfield team. What are they doing well right now? Like, it's a legitimate question. Bakersfield, they're okay in terms of generating turnovers. They're 96th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And Cal Poly, they have been outside the top 3 in terms of their own ball security. But you know who else is outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis? Cal State Bakersfield at 303rd. Cal Poly, they're more around about 353rd, so that's a little bit of an issue. But so this is a Bakersfield team that they're a top 30 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. And on those 2-point shots, they're 347th in terms of making them. And it actually goes down when they're at home. And you've got a Cal Poly team that they've been a relatively solid 3-point shooting team away from home. They're about a country average team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. But for Cal Poly, they are shooting about 36.7% from 3-point in a road/neutral court venue. That is a mark that is in the top 75 in all of college basketball. And you've got Ahmad Musa, who I really like for this Cal Poly team, as he's been able to supply 20.5 points, 6.5 boards. He shoots 38.5% from 3-point range. Peter Benjai has been able to shoot 40% from 3. He gives you about 14 points per game. It's a Cal Poly team that has been really giving it up on the inside. They're outside the top 3 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So I do think that you're going to get plenty of scoring in this game. Set by total 163.5. I do like the over, especially with Bakersfield now being a top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game. Cal Poly, they are number 3, but also for Cal Poly, you've been able to get relatively good production as well, with about 14.5 to 15 points per game out of Caden Ward, who's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. And for Bakersfield, it's been really relying upon having Mr. CJ Hardy be able to pop it from 3 to be able to give you any sort of perimeter offense, as they're outside the top 340 as well with their 3-point shooting percentage. As for Hardy, he has been heartily shooting 35% from 3 with about 13.5 points per game. And Jaden Anderson, he does shoot about 35.5% from 3. Jaden Alexander, about 9.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. But for a team that relies so much on low post play and just toughness, you've only got 2 guys on the roster. They give you over 4.3 rebounds per game. Ron Jessup, 2 blocks, a steal, 6 boards, 11.5 points per contest. And then Pierre Genste, who comes over from Fresno State, 6.7 rebounds and 2.9 points per game. So he's getting over double the amount of rebounds that he is points. But I do think that the turnovers for Bakersfield and just flat out not executing on the inside going to be costly. And I do like Cal Poly in this spot. I like Cal Poly on the money line, set them as a 7.5 point favorite. And I'm going to be in on the over. Semi-total at a 163.5, 823, 824. Montana State is on the road against Sacramento State, and Sac State is a home underdog here of 6 to 6.5 points. 154.5 to 153.5 is the total. I made a total of 151.5. So I'm in on the under. You got dueling tempos here. Montana State looking to slow it down to 69th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Sacramento State, they're looking to speed things up at 41st in the country. And for Sacramento State, this has been a unit that's just not shot it well from 3-point range. They are 41st in the country, albeit they shoot 37.9% from 3-point range at home, 26.7% when they're away from home. But Montana State, they've been allowing teams to shoot just 31.3% from 3-point range when they've been away from home. That's a top 75 mark in all of college basketball, so I do think that they're going to be able to hold them down after Mikey Williams was dealing with a little bit of injury. Should be good to go in this game, as he's been their top guy, 16.5 points, 4.5 assists per game. Doesn't really shoot it well from 3 at 25%, but Prophet Johnson, he has been profitable for being able to give you some nice props, 16 points, 3.5 assists, 2.5 steals, so he's been solid there. It is a Sacramento State team that has been able to generate a few turnovers, top 225 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but his team is just getting gashed down low. They're outside the top 290 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're a bottom 30 team in the country with their own 2-point shooting percentage, and this is a Montana State team that they try to push you down low. They're a top 65 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 2-point range. They've been a country average team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, for Montana State, they're a top 100 team with regards to both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Not going to grab a lot of second and third chances. They're outside the top 250 with regards to their offensive rebound percentage, but they're doing a good job in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances as well. And with having Jeremiah Jerry still out of the fold for Sacramento State, that was their top rebounder. That's big. Montana State, top 175 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Sacramento State, they're more around about 261st, so they're on a disadvantage there. And then for Montana State, your top 2 scorers, Jed Miller, Patrick McMahon, they combine for a little bit over 28 points per game, and Miller shoots 43% from 3. Davion Brown shoots 43% from the outside. You don't necessarily have that one dominant rebounder, with Miller being the lone guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but Montana State keeps things clean. They're a top 75 team. There's a few turnovers on a per possession basis. In a pressure spot, they shoot 75.5% the free throw line. So me, Montana State, the 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it in. I'm in on the under. I said by total at a 151, 825, 826. It is Montana on the road against Portland State. Portland State is a favorite here of 3.5 points. So this game is 143.5, and with Portland State. I made them the 5.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Portland State, I believe, has covered all but 3 games as far this season. They've been able to do a great job with that regard, and Portland State should have a nice advantage on the glass. They are 36th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. At home, teams are grabbing just 18.4% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is the top 10 mark in the country, and right now for Montana, it's just a lot of sloppy basketball. In terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, this is one of the worst teams in terms of taking care of it in the country, as right now they check in a nice hearty 327th in all of college basketball. Over 20% of their possessions away from home result in a turnover. Now, Portland State 282nd with this regard as well, so they've been having their issues on that front, but it is a Portland State team that they should be able to own things down low, and you've got a Montana team that is just not grabbing second and third chances outside the top 340 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. Additionally, you've got a Montana team that's actually shot it really well from three-point range away from home, 38.9%. That is 15th in all of college basketball, but Portland State, they do a good job with regards to their interior offense, 40th in the country in terms of two-point shooting percentage at home, and it is a Portland State team that you've got 2 main scorers that have been able to step up, as you've got scary Terry Miller. He's been your main guy with 19.5 points, shoots 41% from 3, 4 assists, 6.5 rebounds per game. Jalen Henderson, 6.3 assists per game, 17.5 points. He only shoots about 25% per thing. And Portland State, they've had their own turnover issues outside the top 235 in terms of ball security. They have been a top 150 team in terms of generating turnovers as well, but Portland State additionally has been a top 100 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. So I do think that they should be able to hold up there, and you got a Montana group that they're not really going to put you under too much stress outside the top 30 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. So should have Portland State being able to get good, clean possessions. And to the crowd of Montana, they've been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and down low, they have been a top 50 team with their two-point shooting percentage. So when they don't turn the ball over, they do find good looks, and they shoot 78% of the free throw line. Money Williams, he has been money for the team, 19 points, 5.5 assists per contest. Dejan Sawyer, he's the lone other double-figure scorer, and he's the only guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, 11 points, 5.1 boards per contest. But Tyler Thompson has been able to shoot about 43% from three-point range. He's been able to give you about 9 or so points per contest. I do think that both of these teams are going to be able to click on offense, and both of these teams are inside the top 120 in terms of total possessions per game, so they're looking to push a little bit of tempo for Montana. This is a group that, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they are actually a top 100 team away from home, but with the way that they're giving it up with regards to not being able to hit the glass, and this being a Montana team that you look at them in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis being right around about 223rd, I do think the Portland State wins from within, semi-line at 5.5. One to lay with Portland State, and like the over, I did semi-total at a 151.5, 827, 828. You've got UC Davis on the road against Cal State Northridge. CSUN is a pick'em to a 1.5 point favorite, in some places a 1.5 point underdog, so a lot of variance here as to who the favorite and the underdog is. 163.5 to 164.5 is the total, and I said CSUN has a 4 point favorite, so whether that be as a small favorite, a small underdog, a pick'em, I'm going to be in on CSUN. You've got a UC Davis team that finds themselves back in the top 125 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and overall a respectable defense. 200th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, it is a Northridge team that they're more around about 221st, so both teams are on relatively equal footing there. The big thing for CSUN is they're going to need to take care of the ball in this game. For Northridge, 251st in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Davis has been even worse, so they're about 277th in the country, and for UC Davis, they've had the likes of Elijah Pepper, Ty Johnson in the past just be those main headline guys. This year, you've got 2 guys in tandem that have really been able to take over the game, as you've got Niles Cooper and Connor Sevilla combining for 27.7 points per game. Sevilla's shooting 44% from 3. Cooper gives you a little bit more of the dirty work, 5 boards, 2 assists, steal and a half per contest, and then Nico Dokac, he's able to give you about 5.5 boards, 10.5 points per contest for a UC Davis team that they're not going to give themselves second chances. They're outside the top 275 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They're not allowing a lot of second and third chances either. They've been a top 225 team with that regard, but I do think that Northridge, their best opportunity is going to be able to just go down low and be able to grab a few second and third chances with Northridge in terms of percentage of their shots that become an offensive rebound. This is a team that checks into the top 175 in all of college basketball. They grab 32.1% of their misses as an offensive rebound, and you've got Larry Hughes' son, who's been really the top guy for this team, as Larry Hughes Jr. / Larry Hughes II. He's been able to supply 18.5 points. He shoots 40% from three-point range, and it is a Northridge team that has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of not allowing second and third chances themselves. They've been a top 125 team with this regard as well. Now for Northridge, they shoot 66.3% of the free throw line in a pressure spot. That is not great, to say the least, but you do have Josh O'Gara, who's able to give you 14 points, 9.5 boards, Joshua Davis has been able to give you 6.5 assists, 14 points per game. Muhammad Fofana gives you about 8 rebounds per game. I do think that the raw horsepower that you've got down low for this Northridge team, and it being a Northridge team that's looking to pile drive the ball down low, top 50 team with regards to percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range, I do think that they find a way to get the job done in a game that I think is going to be relatively up-tempo with Northridge in terms of total possessions per game, 11th in all of college basketball. Davis are more around 102nd. I did set my total here at a 162. I think that 163.5, 164.5 gets a little bit too high with the turnovers in this game, so in on the under end with Northridge, whether that be as a small favorite or underdog, could be in on them. 829, 830. It's Long Beach State. They're on the road against UC Riverside. Riverside is a underdog here of a point to a point and a half. Total on this game between 144 to 145.5, and as a Long Beach State as 1.5 point favorite. So as a pick'em / 1 point favorite, I am in on Long Beach State, and recognizing the Long Beach State, they've got their deficiencies. Not a team that's really given themselves second and third chances outside the top 275 with regards to their offensive rebound percentage, but they're really good in terms of not allowing second and third chances themselves. For this Long Beach State team, in terms of defensive rebound percentage, they've been a top 85 team in all of college basketball, and it's a Riverside team that's been rough with regards to the turnover battle. They are outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense and turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense. They're outside the top 250 with that regard as well. Meanwhile, you've got a Long Beach State team that they themselves have had a little bit of a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball, but they at the very least generate turnovers. They're a top 150 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and if you look strictly in a road / neutral court venue, they do ascend into the top 100, as a matter of fact, the top 75 with that regard. And for Long Beach State, you've got a pair of guys that are able to really headline things with Gavin Sykes, 18 points, 37% three-point shooter, and Petar Mestrovich comes over from Syracuse, 15 points. He shoots 37.5% for 3, 6 boards. These two guys combined for about 3.5 assists, and Mestrovich gives you about 1.7 steals per game. Now, it is a Long Beach State team that has been getting gashed from the outside. They're right around about 300th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and Riverside is a respectable three-point shooting team. Right now, they're shooting about 33% from three, just hair outside the top 200. You've got Andrew Henderson, who's been able to give you 16 points, shoots 36% from three, and then you've got Osiris Gary, who he comes over from Utah Valley. He's been able to give the team 12 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. BJ Colley, he's been able to come in and give the team about 5.5 rebounds per game as well, but it's a Riverside team that does find themselves outside the top 275 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They're not allowing a lot of second and third chances themselves, but it is just a really rough team with regards to their overall shooting percentages as well. They're outside the top 260 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and with the way that they lose the turnover battle, I do think the Long Beach State gets the job done in a pressure spot. It is the Long Beach State team that they're shooting about 73.2% the free throw line, Riverside 73.5%, so very equal there. I did set Long Beach State as the 1.5 point favorite, so taking them on this rather pick 'em line, and I'm going to be in on the over. I did set my total at a 147.5. 831, 832. You've got UC Santa Barbara on the road against UC San Diego. UC San Diego 4.5 point favorites. Total on scheme 144.5 to 145.5, and I did make a total here of a 153.5. I'm going to be one to take a shot on the over, as you've got a UC San Diego team that has been able to do a very solid job in terms of being able to just find a way to be able to keep things clean. Now, for this UC San Diego team, they actually shoot it significantly worse from three-point range when they're at home rather than away from home, as for San Diego, they shoot 36.6% from three-point range away from home, 30.5% at home, and then you got a Santa Barbara team that has been actually really, really good with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, as for Santa Barbara, they shoot 44.3% from three-point range at home, 35.1% in a road / neutral court venue, so that's been interesting, but you got a Santa Barbara team that's just getting absolutely blitzed from the outside. Right now, they're allowing teams to shoot over 36% from three-point range. That's outside the top 285 in all of college basketball. And both of these defenses, they've been a little bit hit or miss with this UC San Diego team. They overall are about 78th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're allowing about 5 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than when they're away from home, so that's an issue there, as a matter of fact, outside the top 225 with that regard. Meanwhile, you've got a UC Santa Barbara team that they're 251st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and you do have a Santa Barbara group that has been able to get relatively good production out of their main guys. Mario Little, who's with a little bit of an injury, he's been able to give you about 3 assists per game. He should be all good to go in this game. Ada Mahaney has been able to shoot just above 40% from 3, 14 plus points per contest, and on the flip side, you've got a San Diego team that really doesn't have dominant rebounding, but you do have a trio of guys in Hudson, Mays, along with Tom Beatty and Dole Bengo, who have all been able to give you between 5 and 5.6 rebounds per game. And then you got your top scorer in Leo Beth, who gives you 15 points, 4.9 rebounds per game. She's 37% from three-point range. Alex Shulkin continues to shoot 43% from three-point range. And it's a San Diego team that's a top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They really don't pull in there for themselves a lot of second and third chances, but they execute on the inside. Top 100 team with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage. Top 100 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. And for Santa Barbara, you've been able to get some relatively good defensive rebounding. They've been a top 75 team in terms of not allowing second and third chances. Zion Sensley give you 7 rebounds per game. That's been a big reason why, but they're a team that's going to put you on the free throw line. They're outside the top 3 in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis, and I do think that with the Santa Barbara team giving up a ton on the inside, they're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. You get a higher scoring game, and San Diego getting the job done. San Diego is a 5.5 point favorite. Won't lay up to 5 with them. I like the over. I set my total 153.5. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 8:33, 8:34. Hawaii is on the road against UC Irvine. Zots off for the Anteaters, who do find themselves as a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. In some places, a 1 to 1.5 point underdog. So flip of favorites in some of these books. Totals between 137.5 to 138.5, whether it be as a small favorite or small dog. I'm in on Irvine. I did set them as a favorite of 3.5 points. You've got a Hawaii team that's actually numero uno in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but that said, you've got yourself a group in Hawaii that has been very suspect in terms of taking care of the ball on offense, here in 23rd in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. UC Irvine, they're not doing a great job in terms of taking care of the ball, and they have been only about 286th or so in terms of points per possession, but they're also 219th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. You've got a Hawaii team that they shoot about 32.2% from three-point range overall, but for Irvine, they do shoot about 35.8% from three-point range. Now Hawaii, they're a top 10 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage as well, so they've just been so dominant with that regard. But Irvine, they always do a very rock-solid job with regards to their two-point shooting percentage defense, and that's big because Hawaii is not necessarily a team that is too comfortable being able to pop too many threes, as for Irvine, they are actually number 1 in the country in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. So I do think that you get, even though you're going to be able to get a relatively decent amount of possessions in this game, Irvine is not super-duper fast, not super-duper slow, 129th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Hawaii, they're actually 69th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think that you get an under here. I set my total at a 137.5, and I recognize the issue that you do have with UC Irvine and their free throw shooting. They're outside the top 3 with that regard, but I'm still willing to trust them at home because you do have a pair of guys in Darren Sarr and Alondrian Dixon who combine for about 27.5 points per game. And Dixon does shoot 40% from 3. Kyle Evans, 3.2 blocks, 11.5 points, 8 rebounds per game. He's been able to do a nice job there, and then these guys like Andre Henry, who's been dealing with a little bit of an injury, Harrison Carrington, these guys have been able to do a nice job in terms of mixing and shaking. And for Hawaii, it's a whole greater than some of its parts collective, with one really nice little post presence in Isaac Johnson. 6 boards, 13 points, and at 7 feet tall, he actually shoots about 31% for 3 and 88% at the free throw line. And a pressure spot, it is Hawaii team that's country average, shooting 73% at the free throw line, but we also have a trio of guys, Harry Ruyadev, Quandre Bullock, and Gatis Nemishka, who've all been able to give you 10.5 to 12.5 points per contest, but Ruyadev, the only out of those 3 guys that shoots above 27% from three-point range. I do think that for Irvine, they're going to be able to just out-physical a Hawaii team that's really looking to cash in down low. Hawaii has been a top 85 team with their two-point shooting percentage, struggle from the outside. I think that UC Irvine's interior defense just enough to get it done here. I'm going to be willing to take Irvine as a slight favorite / a slight dog, made them the 3.5 point favorite, and at a 138 or higher in on the under, and now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-519, 306-520. UMass Lowell is going to be on the road against New Hampshire. New Hampshire, a slim favorite here of 2.5 points, and your total is 142.5. And I said New Hampshire is a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It is a UMass Lowell team that's looking to push a little bit of tempo, not necessarily like warp speed or anything, but 168th in terms of total possessions per game. New Hampshire, they're about 206th, and New Hampshire's actually been a solid defense this year. They're a top 235 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Lowell's just struggling in every facet of basketball. They're 309th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, a bottom 100 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Lowell's not going to press the issue whatsoever. They're 300th in the country in terms of generating turnovers on a per possession basis, and this New Hampshire team, they're rough with their three-point shooting. Their only shooting is collective about 32% outside the top 265 with that regard, but you got a trio of guys I really like. Jack Graham, 10.5 points. He shoots about 34% from 3. Bilal Al-Shakiri, he's able to give you 8 boards, 10.5 points per contest. Austin Green on the flip side for Lowell gives you 6+ rebounds, so he'll be able to match up with that, but Gajan Robinson, about 12 points, 2.5 assists. He's another like 33% three-point shooter, and for New Hampshire, in a pressure spot, they only shoot about 69% at the free throw line. That's going to be a little bit of an issue, but They've been a top 225 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. And for UMass Lowell, this is a group that is looking to get the ball down low a little bit more. They've been a top 250 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. You've been able to have Anel Montas be able to give you 12 points. He's been able to give the team a little bit of a lift. And Dario Yepto, he shoots 38.5% from 3, might actually be the best 3-point shooter in this game. But with Lowell just having all those turnovers, 13 turnovers per game, it's outside the top 300 with regards to ball security. And in a pressure spot, they shoot 66.2% at the free throw line. They cannot be trusted there. This is a group that do a solid job in terms of keeping their opponents off the free throw line, but it's not like New Hampshire shoots it well at the free throw line either. I think that you get a game that is going to be seeing a little bit of late game fouling, and I do think that New Hampshire, they do find a way to be able to pull it out in the end. I do think that you get some scoring with UMass Lowell being such a bad defense. I did somehow line at 5.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with New Hampshire, and I'm in on the over semi-total 145.5, 306-521, 306-522. Bryant, they're on the road against Binghamton. Binghamton is a home underdog of 1 to 1.5 points, 131 to 131.5 is the total, and I made Binghamton the 1-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. You've got a pair of teams that just have not been great on offense. I will say, for Bryant, they're a relatively okay interior defense. 112th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Binghamton is just struggling up and down the boulevard. They're outside the top 290 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Bryant, they're about 280th in terms of their opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And Binghamton, they have not been able to shoot it from 3 all season long. Bryant has not been able to shoot it from 3-point range all season long, and Bryant 363rd in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And if you look just in games played away from home, Bryant is dead stinking last in points per possession, and that's a big reason why I just couldn't back them here. I recognize Binghamton is awful, 334th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. I did set a total here of a 133. I actually do think that both of these teams get online a little bit more, so I'm going to be in on the over. As Binghamton, they've just been dealing with a year from HE double hockey sticks with all the injuries that they have taken, but still have a pair of guys that are able to give you 12 plus points per contest. Lear Beverly, 12.5 points, throws in their 5 boards per contest. And Jeremiah Quigley comes over from Iona, 6.3 assists, 1 steal, 13 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. So these guys have been solid. Problem is, you just don't have any 3-point shooting with this team. They shoot 30% from 3-point range. That is outside the top 320 in all of college basketball. They have been a top 275 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. And for Ryan, you've got one guy that I actually really like. They've had the freshman Tefal Radulski be able to give you 12.5 points, 4.5 rebounds. He actually shoots 35% from 3. There is nobody else around him, though. You've got one other guy that shoots above, I would say, 27% from 3 on the team. That'd be Aaron Davis. He's supplying 9 points, and he does shoot 40% from 3. Everyone else just absolutely awful from the outside. You don't have a single guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. It's a Bryant team that's getting blasted down low. They're right now outside the top 275 with regards to their overall rebound percentage, and they just continue to lose the turnover battle outside the top 320 in terms of their ball security, outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Binghamton, they find themselves right in the same boat. So you've got 2 really sloppy offenses. You've got a Bryant team that's relatively okay on defense, but you've got a little bit more firepower with Binghamton. And if Binghamton can find a way to the free throw line, top 125 team, shooting 74.7% of the free throw line, I think that wins out in a game that I think is going to be very close between 2 awful teams. I set my line at 1. I'm going to take Binghamton here on the money line and on the over semi-total at a 133, 306-523, 306-524. You've got Albany playing us to NJIT. NJIT is a underdog here of 4.5 to 5.5 points. 138.5 is the total line. I said Albany is a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. NJIT outside the top 320 in terms of their overall rebound percentage, and it's an Albany team that they're not really going to come up with a lot of turnovers. About 275th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. NJIT right there with them at about 279th, and I do think that the tide is starting to turn a little bit more for NJIT. They were dealing with an injury to their top returning scorer in Sebastian Robinson, and you're in conference play because overall for the season he's averaging about 13 points per contest, but conference play is up to 19 points per game, and he shoots about 25% from 3-point range in conference play, so that's been a little bit of an issue. And Melvin Ekangboli, who comes over from UMKC, he in the 9 games that he's actually played, 7.6 rebounds per game. So NJIT, while they're really, really bad with their interior play, they're outside the top 350 with their 2-point shooting percentage, outside the top 300 with their rebounding percentage. That is getting a little bit better, and then you got David Bolden, who shoots 34% from 3-point range, but this is an Albany team that even even though they're not really going to put you under duress. I do have a little bit more confidence in them on defense. They've been a top 250 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Now it's a Albany team that in a pressure spot, they shoot 65.6%. The free throw line, that is a bottom 15 mark in all of college basketball, but that said, this has been a top 150 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. They do a nice job driving the ball down low. Zach Matalu as well gives you 9.5 points. He shoots 38% from 3. Amir Lindsay, 17 points, 4.5 assists. He's been able to shoot about 34% from the outside. Akuchi Okeke has been able to give you nearly 2 blocks, 9.5 points per game. Even with Iqbal Bully now in the fold for NJIT, they just can't match up with that, and I do think that Albany is able to find a way to be able to get it done here, and it's an NJIT team that if they find themselves in a pressure spot, more around 72% at the free throw, and it is an Albany team that will follow a little bit. So circumstance where I set my line at 7, I'm going to be willing to lay with Albany, and did set a total here of a 141. I am in on that total over as well. 3-6-5-25, 3-6-5-26. You've got Gardner-Webb, and they're going to be on the road against UNC Asheville. Asheville's a favorite of 17.5 points, 149.5 to 150.5. This is a total, and I said Asheville is a 24.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. This Gardner-Webb team, 361st in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 363rd in points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, it's an Asheville team that's not laying the world on fire. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, just 218th in terms of points per possession, and they're actually averaging fewer points per possession at home rather than away from home, but they are 40th in the country, shooting 37% from 3-point. And guess what Gardner-Webb is? Outside the top 320 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Gardner-Webb not generating any turnovers whatsoever, and this is a Gardner-Webb team that is just flat out bad. They're outside the top 320 also with regards to their rebound percentage. Like, there is just not a single metric that Gardner-Webb is like halfway respectable in, other than perhaps free throw shooting. They shoot 70.5% of the free throw line. That's a top 275 mark. So, yay, verily there, but yeah, this is not great to say the least. You do have Jacob Hogworth, who's able to give you 11.7 rebounds per game. He's the only guy in the roster that gives you over 4.4 rebounds per game. Spence Sims has actually been able to shoot about 43% from 3. He supplies about 10.5 points per contest, and Hogworth shoots 45% from 3. Problem is he's attempted fewer than 12 threes thus far this season, and pretty much everyone outside those two guys, they really don't shoot from 3 whatsoever, so that's a big giant issue. And for UNC Asheville, this is a team that's able to go into flamethrower mode from 3-point range, as you've got a lot of different guys that have been able to do a nice job with their overall versatility. With Toya Solomon, give you 16.5 points, 7 boards. He's actually now shooting about 40% from 3. Justin Wright has been Mr. Wright, 17.5 points. He shoots 41% from 3. DJ turned it up. Patrick, 40.5% 3-point shooter, 10.5 points per game. And then Cameron Taylor throws in their 18 points per game. We've got a Gardner-Webb team that I have no idea why, but they're looking to play up tempo, and Asheville's actually slowed down. Asheville's 223rd in terms of total possessions per game. Gardner-Webb up to 79th, but we've already seen Gardner-Webb give up 90 points to Division II North Greenville on their home floor. I think that Asheville going to be able to very much tear apart this awful defense and be able to cover this number. Semi-line at 24.5, I'm willing to lay with Asheville. Semi-total at 156.5, I'm also in on the over. 3-6-5-27, 3-6-5-28. Lipscomb is on the road against Jacksonville. Jacksonville is a home underdog of 3.5 to 4.5 points. 140.5 to 141.5 is the total line. I said Lipscomb is a 5.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 4.5. It's a Lipscomb team that has been able to do a solid job being a top 100 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they shoot it well from 3. 51st in the country at 36.4% from the outside. Jacksonville, they're not shooting well from 3-point. They actually do shoot 36% from 3-point at home, 30.7% away from home, but overall 268th in the country in terms of their overall 3-point shooting percentage. And Jacksonville is typically a team that prides themselves on good, solid defense. They're 298th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You look at them in terms of overall points allowed on a per possession basis. They have tumbled all the way down to being 302nd in the country. Not really playing with a lot of tempo either for Jacksonville. 329th in terms of total possessions per game. Lipscomb playing quite a bit more up tempo. 62nd in the country there. Lipscomb, I'm not going to call them an amazing defense, but they are a team that they do generate those turnovers. They are a team that has been able to do a relatively okay job on the inside, as they do have a few holdovers from a season ago, and they're guys with size. Charlie Williams stands right around 6'10". Same with Grant Asman, and Asman 14.5 points, 6.5 boards, shoots 38% from 3. Williams shoots 34% from 3. Doesn't throw in there a lot of rebounds, but pair of assists per contest. And Mateo Esmeraldo, he gives you about 10 points, 7 assists per contest with fewer than 2 turnovers per game. And for this Lipscomb team, also top 200 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Their country average team at opponent with his 3-point shooting percentage. They do allow a little bit more on the inside, but for Jacksonville, you just don't have that one guy that's able to take over a game for you. As a matter of fact, for Jacksonville, you don't have a single guy that averages averages over 10 points per contest. You've got Chris Lockett, Jalen Jones, Chris Arias, along with Hayden Wood, that all combine for between 8.2 and 9.9 points per contest. You don't have a single guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. It's a unit that has been not generating a lot of turnovers, outside the top 10 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They are a top 225 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, and they don't allow a lot of second and third chances. They've been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but in the end, Lipscomb, I do think that they're going to be able to outgun a Jacksonville team that is just not executing on offense or on defense. I think that Jacksonville's slow tempo actually costs you an over here. So set by total 139.5 in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 5 here with Lipscomb. 36-5-29, 36-5-30. Stetson is on the road against North Florida. North Florida is a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. 167.5 is the total, and I did set my total at 166.5, so 167 is my buy point on the under. We've got a North Florida team that's very much playing at a harebrained pace, 30th in the country in terms of total possessions. Brain Stetson, 189th in the country. And for Stetson, this is typically a team that does a really good job of being above from three. And in conference play, they're shooting above 35% for three, but overall for the season, 32.3% and 27% away from home. Oy vey. And you got a North Florida team that's actually shot a relatively decent from three, considering over 50% of their shots come from three-point range. They're 70th in the country. They shoot 35.9% from three-point range. You got a pair of teams that are just getting absolutely flattened on the glass. North Florida is one of the worst defensive rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. They are currently checking in a nice hearty 364th as 39% of opponents' missed shots become an offensive rebound. Stetson not too much better as they're 273rd in the country. So that's an issue. And neither team really grabs a lot of second and third chances as well, so it makes it an awkward little bit of situation. But Cameron Oriole should be the best player in this game, 20.5 points, 4.5 assists for North Florida. He shoots 41% from three. Ken Jackson shoots 37% from 3 points with 14 points per contest. And then you've got pretty much a quartet of guys in Trey Caddy, Devin Hines, Dalton Gaiman, BJ Plummer, that'll give you 7.7 and 9.7 points per contest. Other than Hines, all of them shoot at least 34% from 3-point range. And for Stetson, they have been able to get a little bit more production out of the main guy that returns in Jamie Phillips. He's led the way with 16 points, shoots 34.5% from three. And in conference play, again, they're shooting a little bit above 35% from 3-point range, but they don't give themselves any sort of second and third chances. Colin Cool's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. He and Phillips are the lone two guys on the roster that give you over 3.5 rebounds per game. It's a Stetson team that is right now about country average in terms of 3-point shooting percentage defense. They allow teams that only shoot a hair above 34% from 3-point range. They haven't been the world's worst there, but when they get to the free throw line, they shoot 66.8% at the charity stripe. They're outside the top 350 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Well, this is a North Florida team that is very much looking to bomb it from three. They have been a top 125 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, and in a pressure spot, they shoot 78.3% at the free throw line. So this at North Florida is 4.5 point favorite. Willing to lay the small number with them, and in on the under, so by total 166.5, 306, 531, 306, 532. USC Upstate, they play us to Longwood. Longwood is a underdog of 1 to 1.5 points, 144 to 144.5 is the total line. Made a total of 145. I do like the over. You've got a pair of teams that are going to be looking to play relatively mid-tempo. Upstate is about 128th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Longwood is 137th. For Longwood, they've been very good in terms of generating turnovers, and they've been awful in terms of taking care of the ball. For Longwood, they are outside the top 300 with regards to both turnovers on a per possession basis and their 3-point shooting percentage, but they have also been 49th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and Upstate is not a team that's going to put you under too much stress. You're 76th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and for this Upstate team, they're only shooting about 30.5% from 3-point range at home, but this is an Upstate team that they do the little things much better. It's a Longwood team that just has not been necessarily the most savory team in terms of being able to grab second and third chances on the glass. As for Longwood, they have been able to get good production out of Elijah Tucker, has been able to give 12.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Now, they have been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Offensive rebound percentage has been leaving a little bit more to be desired, and while Longwood is a top 150 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, as you've got Jokoi Hutchinson, who's been able to give you about 12 points. He only shoots about 26.5% per three. Your main 3-point shooter has been Red Thompson, shooting 37% per three, 10.5 points per contest, but I do think that the turnovers are going to be a big, giant issue in this game. And on the flip side, you got an Upstate team that has really been just a really nice collective in general. You've got your main guy in Madison, Benninger, who's been able to give you 15.5 points, shoots 35% per three, but then you've got a pair of guys in Cabral Adkins, Kamari Gregory, who have been in the program for multiple years. They combine for 27 points per game. Between the two of them, they're shooting about 34.5% from three-point range. Lyric Davis throws in their 5 boards per contest. Braylon Garcia, about 5 rebounds per game as well. So they're doing a nice job in terms of doing the little things well for Upstate. Country average team with their 3-point shooting percentage. Top 125 team in opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. So that's big against a Longwood team that they're very much looking to get the ball inside with their bad 3-point shooting percentage. But I do think that in the end, Upstate does find a way to be able to persevere here, even though they do shoot just 68.5% the free throw line. That's a little bit of an issue. We've got a Longwood team that they shoot closer to 76% the free throw line. I think that Longwood just too sloppy to be able to get it done. Did set my line at a 5, so I'm going to be willing to lay with Upstate, and do like the over semi-total at a 145. 3-6, 533, 3-6, 534. Lemoyne is going to be on the road against Long Island. Long Island does find themselves as a mid-tier favorite here of 6 to 6.5 points. 147.5 is the total, and to set a total of 151. I do like the over. You've got two teams that are relatively mid-tempo. For Lemoyne, they're about 233rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. LIU, they do check in 163rd, and LIU games just involve a lot of second and third chances. Long Island has been a top 60 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage of their own missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Outside the top 290 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and Long Island does shoot about 36% from 3, top 85 team in the country, as you've got a trio of guys give you 15 plus points per contest. Greg Gecko Gordon, 15 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists, steal and a half per contest. Malachi Davis, 15.5 points, a little bit over a steal per contest. Jeremiah Fuller, 16 points, 5.5 boards, and Fuller, well, he fills it up. He shoots 48% from 3-point now for LIU. What has been an issue for their offense has been the turnovers, outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, but they do generate them on defense. You're 88th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and Lemoyne, they're outside the top 280 in terms of generating turnovers themselves. Now, this is a Lemoyne team that has been able to do a good job inside. They're a top 35 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, getting blasted from the outside, 326th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got an LIU team that has been allowing teams at home to shoot 39.4% from 3-point, and it's been a Lemoyne team that's actually been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of popping it and locking it from 3-point range. As for Lemoyne right now, they're shooting from 3-point range about 36% away from home. That's a top 50 mark in all of college basketball. And for this LIU team, it has been a unit that has been really giving it up with regards to those offensive rebounds. So that is going to be all up out of Lemoyne team that does have Shiloh Jackson, who's been doing a nice job coming in, giving you about 8.5 rebounds, 14.5 points per game. For Mascara, gives you 14 points per contest, and Mascara shoots 40% from 3-point range. Jackson is also able to give you a block and a half per contest. It's a Lemoyne team that they themselves are outside the top 275 in terms of defense rebound percentage, so that should help out LIU get those second and third chances. It's a Lemoyne team that has been doing an okay job with their interior offense. They're a top 175 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, and you've got a relatively good collective of guys around your main two scorers that have been able to contribute, as you've been able to get about 10 points per contest. So Kai Sanders, Tennessee Rainwater, that's his actual name, shoots over 50% from 3 with 9 points per contest. So do think you get a higher scoring game, but with Lemoyne not being a team that generates a lot of turnovers, with them getting blasted on the glass and being such a bad 3-point shooting defense, I do think that this Long Island team gets the job done. Set Long Island as a 7-point favorite, willing to lay up to 6.5 with them, and like the over, somebody told 151, 306, 535, 306, 536. You've got UMBC, and they are going to be on the road facing off against Vermont. Vermont is a 7.5-point favorite, 139.5 to 140.5 is the total, and made Vermont the 7.5-point favorite. I was seeing a 7 out there before. If we can get a 7 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it, as you've got pair of teams that are really not looking to push tempo. UMBC has really slowed down from past years, 259th in terms of total possessions per game. Vermont is 345th, and in their home games, a bottom 10 team in terms of total possessions per game. Now, for Vermont, what has been the main kryptonite of this team, they're allowing a lot of open looks from 3-point range. They are 250th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but that goes down to 30.3% at home. Meanwhile, it's a UMBC team that, away from home, they allow opponents to shoot 38.7% from the outside, and this is a Vermont team that their lifeblood is really having the TJ Long and TJ Hurley really be able to make their 3-point shots. Now, they've been dealing with a little bit of injury, as you've got TJ Long, who's been out for a few games. He was giving the team 13.5 points, shooting 34% from 3, but the other TJ Hurley, 14.5 points, he shoots 92% free throw line, 37.5% from 3. Gus Yeldon, he's able to give you 16.5 points, shoots 35% from 3 in Vermont. They're outside the top 300 in terms of grabbing offensive rebounds themselves, but they do not allow opponents to be able to grab second and third chances, as they are a top 15 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. So UMBC not going to be able to get those second and third chances. You've been able to have Josh Odowandu, who comes over from Columbia, be able to supply the seam with about 4.5 to 5 rebounds per game. He's like the lone guy on the roster that gives you 5+ rebounds per game. But Jalil King, along with DJ, turn it up to Armstrong. They combine for 28.5 points per contest, and Armstrong shoots 42% from 3. Ace Valentine shoots 40.5% from 3-point range, and It is a UMBC team that has been very much shooting it quite well from three-point range, 84th in the country, and that goes at 37.4% in a road/shoot-score venue. That is a top 55 mark in all of college basketball. With the UMBC, they've been able to do a relatively okay job with regards to their interior defense as well. It's a UMBC team that checks in the top 175 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, so I do think that you're going to get a little bit of a lower scoring game. I do think the UMBC is going to be able to hang around, but I do think that in the end, even with having won the TJs out for Vermont, I do think that there's just a little bit too much there, and for Vermont, they are going to be able to do a nice job controlling things down low, so I'm willing to lay up to 7 with Vermont. Did set a total of 141.5. Even though it's a slower game, I think that you get good efficiency. I'm also in on that total over. 3-6-5-37, 3-6-5-38. St. Francis, Pennsylvania is going to be on the road against Chicago State. Chicago State's between a pick 'em to a 1-point favorite. 140 to 142 is the total. Set a total of 142.5. I do like the over. You had a pair of teams that are relatively mid-tempo for Chicago State, during 26th in the country in terms of total possessions frame. St. Francis looking to bump it up a little bit. They're up to about 126th, and these are two teams that are not really playing a lot of defense, and you go back to the last time these two teams played, St. Francis was really able to punk Chicago State. That was an 81-60 game. I do think that you get a relatively similar total here. I think that this will be a little bit closer, so I am in on the over because I do think that you get those late fouls. But for St. Francis, this has been a unit that has been just really all over the place aside from Skywicks. Skywicks has been incredible for this team, 17.5 points, 7.5 boards, 2.5 assists, shoots 35% from three, but they're really relying upon turnovers. They're a top 175 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. As a matter of fact, a top 115 team with that regard, but they're outside the top 320 with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage and opponents' two-point shooting percentage. They become a country average team with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, but they're also allowing teams to be able to shoot well above 36% from three-point range, and Chicago State, they have similar issues. This is a Chicago State team that has absolutely nothing down low. They don't have a single guy that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, and they should have an issue with Zion Russell, who's been able to give the St. Francis team about 11.5 points per contest in the backcourt, but they've dealt with a lot of injuries with Doyle Cockrell. He's back 13 points, shoots 43% from three-point range. Braylon Bush was out for 6 games. He's back 9 points. He's been able to shoot only about 27 or so percent from three-point range, but throws in their 3 assists per contest as well. Stephen Byard has been in and out of the lineup. He's probably going to be out once again. He was giving the team about 8.5 points per contest, so that had to be factored in, but you've also got a guy in Chancey Gibson he's been able to give you a little bit over assists, 5.5 points per contest, was dealing with a little bit of injury. He's back in the fold for this team as well, and that should be able to elevate them. And for the Chicago State team, they have become a top 125 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they don't do the world's worst job in terms of taking care of the ball. Country average team there in a pressure spot. They shoot 74.7% the free throw line. That's a top 125 mark in the country. Now, they are in the bottom 5 in terms of both their own two-point shooting percentage and opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and that's a big reason why I'm in on the over. But that said, this has been a pair of teams that have been really, really rough in general, but Chicago State now shooting 36.5% from three-point range in conference games. It feels like they're starting to figure it out with all those injured guys coming back, and they've been the top team in terms of winning the turnover battle in the NEC. So set Chicago State as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 2 with them. So I total 142.5, so I'm also in on the over. 3-6-5-39, 3-6-5-40. You got Stony, and they're going to be playing us Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson hopes to be fairly priced as a 1.5 point underdog. 129.5 is the total. Set a total here of a 138. I do like the over. Now, Fairleigh Dickinson has slowed themselves down big time from past years. In terms of total possessions, bring 318th in all of college basketball, and you got a Stony team that they're more around about 246th in the country. It is a Stony team that has been able to do a solid job with their interior defense. They're a top 55 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but both of these teams should be getting plenty of good looks from three-point range, especially with the way that Fairleigh Dickinson is not guarding the three-point line. Fairleigh Dickinson, 362nd in opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Sono, 246th in the country, but that is since a 37% at home. And Fairleigh Dickinson, very strangely, has shot better from three-point range away from home rather than at home. For Fairleigh Dickinson, they do shoot about 32.5% from three-point range away from home, 25.5% at home. And you got a Sono team that has been relatively decent with their overall three-point shooting percentage. They shoot about 32.5% from the outside. As for Sono, they did lose Will Batchelor, one of their main transfers, who came over from the Patriot League 3 games into the season, and they've had to mix and match from there. But you do have someone down low that should be able to stand up to Surreal Martinoff. That's a true 7-footer who's been able to give that team right around about 8.5 points, 5 boards for Fairleigh Dickinson. But Reed Van Tudyk, who's been able to give you 7.5 points, 8.5 boards, he should be a nice elixir there. And then you got Chad Stinson along with Herman Coffey in the backcourt, combining for 24.5 points per contest. Coffey, he shoots 40% from 3, throws in there a little bit under 3 rebounds per contest. And then you got Stinson, who's been able to shoot more in that neighborhood, about 25% from 3, but has been able to give you 10.5 points. He's been relatively solid in terms of giving the team a block per contest. And Devontae Hackett, he throws in there about 11 points per contest as well. And for Fairleigh Dickinson. This was a team that for a very long time they were always built around that backcourt. They've now added a lot of size and doesn't seem to be doing a whole heck of a lot of good for them, as this is a team that's outside the top 270 in terms of both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, Stony, they do not generate turnovers whatsoever. They're dead last in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, so that means clean possessions for this team as Eric Parnell, Joey Neesman, they combine for 24.8 points per game and both shoot about 34.5% from three-point range. One, two guys on the roster that shoot about 33% from three-point range. I recognize that both of these teams are rough, but I do think that this Stonewall team finds a way to get it done against a Fairleigh Dickinson team that has just not been able to do a great job in the backcourt, and I do think that the clean possessions help you out to the over. So, in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 1.5 here with Stonewall, 3 of 6, 541, 3 of 6, 542. New Haven is on the road against Mercyhurst. Mercyhurst is a 5.5 point favorite. 120.5 is the total. So Mercyhurst is an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's a Mercyhurst team that has been able to do a very solid job on defense. They're a top 125 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're a top 175 team in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, and they've been quite good in terms of generating turnovers as well. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, they check in 58th in all of college basketball, and it has been a New Haven team that they've been a top 135 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and New Haven overall, a top 225 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. The one thing that they just don't do a great job of is down low. They're outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they're just getting absolutely exterminated on the glass. 300th in the country in terms of overall rebound percentage. Not to say that Mercyhurst is incredible. They're about 318th themselves, but at the very least, you've got a little bit more size. That's the biggest thing for a team coming up from the D2 ranks, is typically they're just outgunned with regards to size, and that's been the case here. You do have a pair of guys that combine for about 10.2 rebounds per game. It's Stefano Falapala along with Andre Pasha. They combine for about 17.5 points per contest to go along with it as well. But New Haven, they're looking to really make things slow and grimy. 365th out of 365 teams in terms of total possessions per game. Mercyhurst, they're right there with them at 358th, but Mercyhurst is doing by far a better job in terms of being able to execute on offense and, just for lack of a better term, being able to keep things clean. New Haven, 337th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Mercyhurst, they're just 107th, and Mercyhurst does have Jabari Fitzpatrick being able to give you 11.5 points, nearly 2 steals, right around about 2.6 assists per contest, but his team outside the top 275 with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. Not to say that Mercyhurst is like the world's greatest 3-point shooting team or anything like that, but they shoot more around about 33% from the outside with Bernie Blunt, 16 points, 36.5% 3-point shooter. Jake Lellerman is able to give you 40% 3-point shooting, 13 points per game, and Kadir Martin, he's been able to give you 2.5 blocks per contest in a tough spot. Mercyhurst does shoot just 67.5% at the free throw line, 325th, but I don't think it's going to be close enough for late game felling. I did set Mercyhurst as a 11.5 point favorite. Just not feeling this New Haven team whatsoever, a team that was sub 500 at the D2 rank, so I'm going to be willing to lay with Mercyhurst, and did set a total here over 123.5. I think that they take it to a New Haven team that has just not been great down low, so in on the over, I'm willing to lay with Mercyhurst. 306, 543, 306, 544. North Alabama is on the road against Florida Gulf Coast. Florida Gulf Coast, 9.5 to 10.5 point favorites, 150 to 150.5 is the total. Semi-line at 11. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Florida Gulf Coast. This is a Florida Gulf Coast team that's really cranked up their tempo. 66th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and North Alabama, they're playing much more slowly than they have in past years. 286th in the country, and for North Alabama, it felt like they were really turning over a new leaf, being able to play some better defense, and it's a team that does an okay job in terms of taking care of the ball on offense. Top 135 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but even with Cornelius Williams giving you over 11.9 rebounds per game, this team is 298th in all of college basketball. The guards are 2-point shooting percentage. They lose their entire backcourt from a season ago, so their 3-point shooting has really been on the fritz as well as for North Alabama. They as a collective are shooting from 3-point range more in that pocket, about 31.5%. That's hovering right around 300th in the country, and you've been able to have Kanan Jefferson along Dante Bacchus in the backcourt. Both give you 13 points per game, but they combine to shoot less than 30% from 3-point range. You do have Darion King, who has been able to shoot about 44% from 3, but it's on low volume, and he's been dealing with quite a bit of injury. Probably going to be good to go in this game, but since coming back, he has not scored a single point in the games that he's appeared in, and for this Florida Gulf Coast team, you do have quite a bit in the backcourt. Ramir Barno has been able to shoot darn near 40% from 3-point range, and he's been rock solid with about 12.5 points per game. And then J.R. Kozinski, Jordan Ellerby, they combine for 29 points per game, with Ellerby shoots 37% from 3 with his about pair of assists per contest. Kozinski, 15.5 points. He shoots 35.5% from 3. It's a Dunk City team that where they're most vulnerable is their 3-point shooting defense. They've been outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They are a team that has been much better down low, and for Florida Gulf Coast, they're a country average team with their 3-point shooting percentage. We've really seen it go downward here in conference play, but that said, this is a Florida Gulf Coast team that as well has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of giving themselves some second and third chances with Florida Gulf Coast in terms of their overall rebound percentage. They're a top 165 team in all of of college basketball. I do think that they go out there, dominate this game against a North Alabama team that has really not been able to do a great job with regards to their defense either. If you look at them in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they do find themselves outside the top 250 in all of college basketball. And for this North Alabama team, they are currently outside the top 320 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, outside the top 290 with opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I just don't think that North Alabama does their part with this total. So made a total of 148. I'm in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 10.5 here with Florida Gulf Coast. 306-545, 306-546. You've got Radford. They are going to be on the road against Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern, a 3 to a 3.5 point favorite. 162.5 to 163 is the total line for Charleston Southern. I did make them the favorite of 7.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number now. Charleston Southern, bottom 5 team in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but they are not allowing anything easy on defense. With this Charleston Southern team, they are 79th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They're a top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and this is a Radford team that they're going to give up quite a few looks from 3-point range. They are currently 336th in all of college basketball with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and for Charleston Southern, they've been able to have Mr. Blaine be able to step up for them. Bryson Blaine, he's been able to do a lot as a sort of part-time starter. He's come off the bench in a lot of games. 18 points for him, and he shoots about 36% from 3. And then Alan Sumler, 18 points, 3.5 assists. He shoots 42% from 3-point range. It's a Charleston Southern team that's been a top 100 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at 36%. Top 125 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage as well. And this is a bunch that should be able to dominate the rebound battle as well, as this is a Radford team that has had a little bit of issues with this regard. 277th in the country with regards to overall rebound percentage. Recognize that Charleston Southern has been outside the top 200 with regards to their defensive rebound percentage, but they've been a top 200 team with their offensive rebound percentage as well. We're around about 153rd in terms of overall rebounding, and for Radford, you do bring in 2 guards from the ACC to be able to headline things in the backcourt. Dennis Parker, who began his career over at NC State, 19 points. He's been able to shoot 40% from 3. And then Del Jones, who comes over from Clemson, more of a facilitator, 16.5 points, 3.5 assists, and he's been able to throw in there about a steal per contest. Jalen Johnson has been more of an ancillary guard with 11 points, pair of steals per contest. And then you do have Lucas Walsh, who's been able to shoot 46% from 3-point. That's been able to elevate the team, but again, with the way that they just don't guard the 3-point arc to save their lives, and this is a Radford team that they're not necessarily the most comfortable team down low with their lack of rebounding outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. I do think that Charleston Southern goes out there, gets the job done in this spot. I did set my line at a 7.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it in. Got a pair of teams that are really looking to push tempo. Charleston Southern, 13th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Radford, they check in 23rd. So it's not a high total here of a 165.5. I'm in on the over to go along Charleston Southern, 306-547, 306-548. Central Connecticut is going to be on the road against Wagner. Wagner is a home underdog of 2.5 points. It's all game 143.5, and made Wagner the 4-point underdog, so I'm going to be one to lay it. Wagner is playing faster than they have in past seasons. Their coach and Mr. Donald Copeland has been dealing with a little bit of a suspension/leave, but they're back to about 307th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so they're getting back to those roots. And Central Connecticut, not a blazer themselves, 328th in terms of total possessions per game, and for Central Connecticut, solid in terms of taking care of the ball, top 125 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, while Wagner is sloppy with it. They're about 290th in the country, and both of these teams have been really good 3-point shooting teams. For Wagner right now, they do find themselves right around about 9th in the country, and their 3-point shooting percentage actually goes down from their 40.4% away from home to 37.2% at home. At Central Connecticut, they are 35th in the country, 37.2%, but I do believe that Wagner is just going to have a little bit of a tough time down low, even with Xavier Finch being able to give you about 5.5 or so rebounds per game, and then you've got one double-figure score for Wagner has really been able to ascend to Nick Jones, 15 points. He shoots only about 30% for 3, but throws in there nearly 2 steals, 2.5 assists per contest. Jane Baker has been able to give you about 4 assists per game, but it is a Wagner team that, with their defense, they do give it up from the outside while they are actually relatively solid on the inside. Top 100 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but both of these teams have been giving up quite a few good looks from 3-point range. So even though it's going to be a lower tempo game, it should be a very efficient game. You got a Central Connecticut bunch that is 254th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but that's 41.1% from 3-point range at home, 32.8% away from home. Away from home, they're actually a top 110 team. Meanwhile, for Wagner, they're allowing teams to shoot about 36.5% per 3. That's 306th in all of college basketball. And for Central Connecticut, you have to love what you've been able to get out of your main scorer with nearly 20 points and 5.5 rebounds per game out of Darius Smith. He shoots about 38% from 3 at about 6'7". Jay Rogers, 7.3 assists at 2.5 turnovers per game. He throws in there 12 points, 38% 3-point shooting, and then Melo Sanchez and Gabe Spinelli dealing with an injury, both shoot over 45% from 3-point range as well. It's a Central Connecticut team that's been very much on the favorites with their defense, are outside the top 10 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But I think that the way that they've been able to execute so cleanly in offense gets the job done for them. Set my line at 4. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. I just think that you get a really low possession game. Set my total 142. So I'm in on the under. We wrap things up with 306-549, 306-550. Presbyterian on the road against High Point. High Point hopes to not be a low point. They are 17.5 point favorites. So on this game, it is 151.5. Set High Point as a 19.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Presbyterian, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. Right now, they are checking in right in that neighborhood, about 340th in the country. Meanwhile, it's a High Point team that typically they've been a more slow team. They're up to about 80th in the country with this regard, and it is a High Point team that will give up a few looks from three. They're about 124th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, it's a Presbyterian team that it's been pretty rough with regards to their exterior defense. They are 287th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and High Point has just been able to execute on offense. They are currently 13th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Presbyterian, they're a nice hearty 250th, and for Presbyterian, they're very much looking to be able to win the battle down low. You've got a guy in Jalen Peterson, great name, who's been able to give you about 7 boards, 7 points per game, and then Jonah Pierce, he's up to 16 points, 9.5 rebounds per game. It's a unit in Presbyterian that's outside the top 250 with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage. They look to drive the ball down low. They've been a top 175 team there, but when they get to the free throw line, they're outside the top 325, shooting 67% of the free throw line, outside the top 275 in terms of ball security as well. Carl Perro shoots 40% for three with 14 points per contest, but outside Tristan Wilson with his 9.5 points per game, you really don't have much else to write home about. Meanwhile, for the Side Point team, they have been dealing with an injury to their top scorer in Cameron Fletcher, do-it-all guy that actually began his career at the Power Conference level, 16.5 points, 8 rebounds per game, but you still have Rob Martin, Scary Terry Anderson, who combined for 29 points per game, both shoot above 35.5% for three. Scotty Washington shoots 35% for three with 8.5 points. Conrad Martinez has stepped up in a big way, sixth man that shoots about 38.5% from three-point. It's a High Point team that also just flat out does a great job in terms of winning the turnover battle. They're a top 10 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. On offense, on defense, they are 12th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. That goes up to Mambo number 5 when they're at home. And you've also had Owen Aquino in the wake of the injuries be able to step up, give you about 8 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. High Point has been pretty solid in terms of not allowing second and third chances. Top 125 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage, and they're a top 15 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. So it's a circumstance where I do think that High Point going to be able to go out there, dominate this game. Set them as a 19.5 point favorite. We're willing to lay the number in. This is my total 143.5. I think that this is going to be very much a slow down game, and Presbyterian just doesn't do their part with its total. So I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with High Point, and that wraps things up for the Thursday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, large CM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And from there, you're about firing whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via the 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, giving you picks and analysis on every game, every day. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.